Yeah. Okay. Okay. I have this, I don't like using it, but yeah, call the meeting to order. It's 1:05. And so after call the meeting to order, what we'd like to do is, let's do a pledge of allegiance real quick. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome for everyone. What I'd like to do is have a moment of silence for Slim Whitlock, if you don't mind. Thank you. I think I can speak for everyone here that we were all shocked and surprised, and it's sad. So he was really a great person, did a lot for the village of Hatch, had a grocery store for 30 years, and he just sold his property, his grocery store, and was actually helping the guy who bought it, working as his butcher until he could find a butcher. And so they were in the process of trying to find a butcher for him to replace him, so he wouldn't have to work at all. Last conversation I had with him was a couple weeks ago. Kimberly and I were together, and he said that he started work at 3 o'clock in the morning cutting meat for his grocery pretty much every day of his life until he sold his grocery store. And he'd get home, 7, 8 o'clock at night, get a few hours sleep, get up and start cutting meat 3 o'clock in the morning so he'd have the meat necessary to sell this grocery store. And he's well loved in the community. Everybody knew him, and he was just real lost for everyone. And a leader in our community is hard to find. Anybody else like to say something? Okay. All right. With that, then next order is to basically do a roll call of the members, and we'll leave his name off. Brandy, could you do that? By the way, Brandy is going to be our admin today, taking notes and for the meeting. Thank you, Brandy.
Chairperson Reynolds.
Here.
Vice Chair Paxton.
Here.
Director Skinner. Here. Director Day.
Here.
Director Sanchez.
Present.
Okay, so we have a quorum. Next thing is to introduce some of our guests. I see that we have Scott McLaughlin here from Spaceport. Melissa's here from Spaceport. Wayne Savage is here from, thank you, Arrowhead Center. And Dave Pato as legal accountant for, or legal for the, just help. Because you're not really.
For Sierra County.
For attorney for Sierra County, but not for anybody else, right? And who else?
That's Francisco Pilares, our Director of Business Development from the Spaceport.
Okay, Francisco.
And, oh yeah, and Ronnie Bush, who is our Business Operations, and Rod McHale is our new Capital Projects Manager.
So you're having trouble with the names too, huh?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, so welcome to the meeting for the Regional Spaceport District Tax Board. And so now the next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to see if the board would be amenable to moving item F, the presentation for proposed funding, on the first item of the agenda after the minutes. So I'll move that we move item F up to follow the approval of the minutes.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to change the agenda, put item F after the minutes. And we have a second. Anyone have any discussion about it? Okay. All right. Brandy, could I get a roll call?
Director Sanchez,
Yes.
Director Day,
Yes.
Director Skinner. Vice Chairperson Paxton,
Yes.
Chair Reynolds.
No. The motion passes 4-1. Okay, so item F gets moved up after the approval of the minutes. So now, could I get a motion to approve the minutes?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
one correction.
Okay,
Throughout the minutes, it's listed as Paxton. There is no T in Paxton. I've mentioned that several times before.
okay. I appreciate that. Thank you, and I apologize. I did not do a good job of editing these after I got them. So we'll make the correction to all the minutes to take out the T in Paxson. And we'll also make every effort never to make that mistake again, although I think I have already.
Yes, well, with that, I would move to approve the minutes.
I'll second that.
All right. Okay, we have a motion by Vice Chair Paxson and a second by Director Travis. Okay, any discussion other than that? Okay, Randy, could you call the roll, please?
Director Sanchez,
Yes.
Director Day,
Yes.
Director Skinner. Vice Chair Paxton,
Yes.
Chair Reynolds.
Yes. Okay. All right, with that, we'll move to item F. If we could pull it up in the video room, please.
Did you, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
did you want to see if we have any guests online?
We do have a guest online, actually. I have a couple of guests. I apologize. No, thank you, Vice Chair Paxton. We have several, actually. Alan Turk, Cecilia Villegas, Charlie Hurley, Sundar G. Cower, and Amber Vaughn, and I don't know the other two gentlemen. Oh, the other gentleman.
Yes, I'm Art Trujillo, CFO for Spaceport.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you all for joining us remote, virtually. Okay. Thank you, Vice Chair Paxson. All right, so now I think you're up. Scott?
All right, thank you, Chairman Commissioner Reynolds. So what I have is just a brief set of slides about what we could fund with the excess pledge revenue. So and just a note on the language in the statute that we've wrestled with many times, excess pledge revenue shall be used for the financing, planning, designing, engineering, and construction of a regional spaceport. And of course, that was written a priori to the spaceport, but we're still working on developments. The second bullet just talks about what we're trying to do. It's really reflected in our mission that we're trying to increase economic impact in the area for both counties and even the state and the region. Next slide. Just a reminder of the map. That'll be page, I don't have page numbers on here. Next slide, please.
And you actually have
do I
control
do
now
it?
with the mouse under the bottom there. You can actually
Okay.
roll to the next slide.
Okay, just a reminder of our lands. We have about 18,000 acres. These were, the top section is contiguous state trust land that was was found when the early people were looking for the spaceport. And then I believe the section below was added a little bit later, but that encompasses the totality of the spaceport site, Spaceport America. Okay, next slide. So here are the projects that we've listed. So Rod is here again to talk about them if you have any more specific questions. We did not prioritize these necessarily, but we can if we needed to. And I'm going to talk about these each one at a time, but there's a brief description and the estimated cost. And now that I guess I should talk about that real quick. It was going to be in my other presentation, but if you go back a few years ago, we didn't have a capital projects manager. We didn't have somebody who was assigned simply for capital projects. It was actually just the staff of the spaceport. But as the spaceport has gotten busier and busier and busier, it's been harder and harder to dedicate staff to simple capital outlay projects. So a couple of years ago, for a budget request, I asked for one full-time employee from the state, an increase in our general fund, and so we did get that, and so that's how we got Rod hired. So Rod now is in charge of capital projects, and we have 2 other contracted project managers who are carrying out those activities. So our progress, which again is on a separate sheet for the current projects, the other presentation, which we'll get to later, has been moving very fast. So these are the projects, though, that we would like to fund with excess pledge revenue. And I'll go ahead and talk about these one at a time. So the Stark, this is the building that has been in progress for about 4 or 5 years, actually. So it was funds that were granted from the state quite a while back. It was originally $10 million, and it was for an IT center, and there was also a separate funding for what was called a reception center. So what we've done is combine those into the Stark, and we call that the Spaceport Technology and Reception Center. It's designed to be at the very front of the campus, and what it is for a place, right now we don't have any facilities that are outside of what's called the aviation operations area. So the aviation operations area is at any airport or any sort of facility like that. You're outside the fence or you're inside the fence when it comes to the aviation side. And so all of our buildings are inside the fence. The Gateway to Space that Virgin Galactic has, the Spaceport Operations Center. So when we host the public or we host public at the site, they have to go to the SOC, the Spaceport Operations Center. So they're inside the AOA, which in a normal airport would not be quite acceptable. We have to screen people and stuff. Luckily, we're not really a general purpose airport. We're a private airport. But we really don't have the facilities to host anybody. And so what we've done with the Stark is we've added space for STEM and cultural outreach. We have some meeting rooms. The original intent was also to have the IT room. Right now, the IT room for the whole site is inside the Gateway to Space. And there's also a triage area for the public or for anybody on site. And there's a guard area and a badging area and an area where we could even rent out space for either payload processing or a mission control or a meeting like this. So that's what the Stark is. Again, our original budget was about $10 million. With the cost of construction increasing, we're at about a $4 million shortfall, so that's part of the request on this. Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, Scott, do you have 10 or 11 million secured now and you need 4? What is the source of?
Yeah, Chairman, yes, sir. We need an additional 4. We have the original, what we've done, where we are in the progress, I guess I should give a little more detail. What you see right there is the 3D rendering. We've already been through a design phase, so we're at, I guess, probably at, what would you say, a 20% design, 30%? We've de-scoped a little bit, and we value engineered, and so we're still $4 million short. So we want to use $4 million from the excess pledge revenue. It's a very public-facing building and allows people to do stuff on campus. You can see it on the top. We've also have a viewing area, so this would be a good viewing area for the Virgin Galactic launches or any of the other launches. And again, this is going to be our primary STEM outreach. You can't see it, but behind the very first wall, there's an outdoor area and a little amphitheater that's specifically designed for STEM.
The question is are those state funds, and do they have a deadline? Or?
Yes, the $10 million is state funds that we already have, and how much time do we have left on those? Fiscal year 26.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. McLaughlin, I'm just curious, when we're looking at this, we say that the scope was reduced significantly. So really, I guess as you mentioned, I guess, what was the original budget going to be for this versus what it, of the 15 million now?
The original, excuse me, Chairman, the original budget was, was broken into two. So we had a reception center and we had an IT center. So previous to my tenure, there were going to be separate buildings. What I did is I wanted them combined into a single building to be a little more efficient with it. And so the total of that was around 10 million.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, Mr. McLaughlin. I'm confused. So you scaled down the project from 10 million to 14 million? I mean, because you said you got 10 million, you're 4 million short. So I thought his question, Director Sanchez, was what was the original plan? At what level were you trying to build the building to? So how did you, I'm just confused with your language.
Yeah, I've been a little confusing, Mr. Chairman.
You said that we need 4 million, but the original plan was 10. We've got 10. Now we need 4 million because the original plan wasn't 14 million. I'm just really, you got me confused here.
Yeah.
Please clarify if you could.
Yeah, let me go back up again. So the money we had available, and this is 4 or 5 years ago, I believe was 4 years ago, was 10 million. Since then, the cost of construction has gone up very significantly. And so that impacted what we can do. We also added a little bit more to the building in terms of a little extra meeting room and the extra STEM area. So the building has a little more, a few more features than was originally envisioned. But in our estimation and what we've planned out, we think this is very needed on the site. And also it's leasable space. So in some circumstances, we'll be able to lease that meeting room I'm talking about to customers on site. The rest of the time, we'll be able to have public-facing meetings or other meetings that can happen on site that we can't have right now. Plus, we'll have that STEM area and the cultural area that wasn't included in the original building, so.
Okay, thank you. But it's your language. You said that you scaled back the project to get it back to 10 million and back to now 14 million with the added cost over time. So when you scaled back from what?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
I'm just trying to get your.
When we went through
confusing me with your
I'm
language.
sorry. No, we recently went through the design phase. And the design phase with a company in Albuquerque, and it went really well. They included everything in the kitchen sink that we asked for, and we were way over.
Like 20 million, 50 million, 100 million?
It was closer to, I think it was closer to 30 million.
See, I think that answers Director Sanchez's question, and I appreciate it, because I didn't think your first answer actually addressed his concern. That's why I questioned again. Thank you. I think you got there. Thank you.
So I apologize. I made that confusing. So
Okay.
is everybody good with the start then? Okay.
Well, Scott, it was actually two buildings before, was it not? And you broke that down into one?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, yes, sir. Yeah, we combined them to be efficient, but then we added a little bit more, and then the construction price went up.
Thank you.
Okay. So moving on to the next ask there, the HLA. So I think I didn't bring a detailed map, but this is the southern part of the runway. And so you can see the GTS there kind of on the very far left. So the expansion plans for the site right now, the very first effort is to expand south. So you can see a road that isn't exactly where the road is going to go, but pretty close to where the road is going to go. And for that part of the spaceport, there are no utilities and there's no road. So in the northern part, we have a little more access with roads, and we have water in the ground, we have electricity in the ground, we have fiber in the ground, but here we don't. And another part of that on the very, very south end, you see the blue at the very end of the runway. That's where we're proposing to build a hangar. So right now we have a fabric hangar, a 90-foot by 90-foot hangar. I think probably you've all seen that out there. We're now leasing that somewhere between 10 and 11 months a year. So it's continuously being used. So the idea is to build one more hangar that we can start leasing at a regular basis and bring in another customer, who will be at Spaceport. So that's but primarily that 1.8 million is the road and the utilities. The next one is the public viewing lot. So we built a a small viewing lot a couple of years ago. And we found that we have somewhere between, I don't know, 10 and 25 cars there every time Virgin Galactic launches. When we had the Thunderbirds, we had 3 or 4 cars out there during the day, off and on. And that's the only area we have in the spaceport where you can safely get off the road and watch something happen. So that turned out to be very popular, but unfortunately, where we put that initially is now in the way of where we need to put the Stark building. And we worked very hard to see if we can incorporate this lot into the Stark area, and it just didn't work. So what we want to do is move it across the street and make it a little bit bigger. And also the Virgin Galactic replica will go across the street. It's directly in sight of the guards, so it will be a secure site. But the people coming out to the spaceport very regularly to just park and look around, take their pictures in front of the replica, and very often they sit at that lot and they watch things going on at the site. So we're going to move it across the street on still part of the state lands that we sublease. So that's what that ask is for.
Excuse me, Chuck, could you use the mouse in order to point to the different things on the picture?
Oh, I'm
To
sorry.
explain what they are? Because you
Yeah.
talked about where it used to be, where it is, what you want to move it to. And I can't see it on the picture. I'm trying to read it and I can't read this tomorrow.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, yeah. So my mouse right now is where the current replica is. This is the replica that was built many years ago by Virgin Galactic to sort of demonstrate what the spaceship would look like. And then this gray area is where the current lot is, which is just a graded, gravelled area. So what we want to do is move everything across the street. So the public then we're also going to build that up a little bit higher. So when the public comes in to see a Virgin Galactic launch or any other activity, they'll still have access to the replica. They'll be able to take their pictures of it. And then they'll be able to park here and watch any flights or any activities at the spaceport.
So you're actually going to want to move the replica from where it's at to the other lot, the new
Right,
lot?
that's correct. Yeah, unfortunately, the Stark is going to go right here where I'm circling. And we tried to move that further out to the east and other directions, but because of utilities, there's a utility line right here, an underground utility line, and other things going on. There wasn't much we could do at that site. So we decided to move the public viewing lot, which again has been very popular.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay. Okay, the next ask is for an extension of the utilities on the north part of the spaceport. So, and I'll use my mouse this time. So if you look right here where I'm circling, this is the Aero Environment site. This was the site that Aero Environment built 3 years ago or so at their own expense. And directly to the east of that, where I'm having the mouse go back and forth, this is their 4,000 foot by 500 foot airstrip that, again, they built at their expense. And they'll be coming back this year. So Air Environment will be doing testing of that. This is the 262 foot wing, solar powered 10 motor. They have flown to 62,000 feet when they were here last time. And again, their goal is to regularly fly this to get it FAA certified. And then they want to build literally hundreds of these. And so we're also talking to them and other customers about manufacturing in the area. But anyway, they moved all the utilities out to their site. But what we need to do is build the road and the utilities again, just like on the south part of the runway to the north part of the runway. And we've had some customers who are very interested in this side of the runway. And we want to open up basically this whole area on the other side of the runway, on the east side of the runway. So that's what that ask is for. The next slide is just, we call it the fence line road, and this is way in the southern part of the spaceport for the advanced technology area. So the advanced technology area, we have the horizontal launch area where the runway is, we have the vertical launch area, and then we have the advanced technology area. The advanced technology area is where spin launch is right now. And what's happened with that road is it keeps getting eroded. You know how it is out there. Everything's fine until you get your 2 inches of rain in 3 hours, and then it all goes to heck. So the idea is to engineer that road with more culverts and protect that road so we can keep the bottom part of the spaceport opened up for other activities. The next slide is the VLA. So again, up here you can see the runway. And so there is a county road that runs right here, and I think this is our internal road right here. This county road right here has been very, very prone to flooding. So when we have a lot of rain, we can't actually get to the VLA. In fact, we had to cancel a day of the Spaceport America Cup a couple of years ago because the rain was, too much and it eroded the road. So we looked very carefully at options for working with the county, the BLM, because we would require an increased right-of-way to work on this road. We also talked about building a road across here and coming back down. And we finally decided the best thing to do would be to build a road here and also run, again, the utilities down that road. And so what that does is it also opens up this whole southern portion of the spaceport, which again is property that we can't really do much with right now, but if we can get the road and the utilities there, that's something we could open up. So, and the little red areas are the cultural sites that have to be mitigated depending on the type of activity that goes on the site. And that's one of the reasons building the road to the east wasn't working out. We had to fight this arroyo if we rebuild it to the east and the cultural sites. And then to really increase the size of this road, this current road, would have meant shutting down the road and having to build another road or at least a temporary road to the side anyway. So it just made sense to concentrate on a twofer and build a new road that also opens up the site better.
Mr. Chair. Our road superintendent, Billy Neely, says that he does not see a potential to expand that road because it goes through so many cultural sites, and that's a problem. And those little arroyos, they're just little gullies, they wash so bad every time it rains, half inch even.
Right.
The maintenance on it is difficult.
It is, and it's, what I'm worried about is the Spaceport America Cup, which at that time was 1,800 students that were locked out for that day, is bad enough. But if we have a high-profile launch or something, NASA, for example, is a customer with Up Aerospace, and if we were locked out of the VLA on that day, that would make life a little bit difficult. So, but again, this is also to open up this area. The other thing I should point out while I'm on this map is you see where my mouse is right there. So this is where the cell phone tower is going in right now. And this is kind of a big deal for us because we've been trying to figure out how to get a cellular in that valley for years. And we've never had anybody. And so we had even talked to the spaceport about anteing up $1 million or so to do it ourselves. But well, luckily, a tower provider came in and said they wanted to be there, and we helped them find a site. So that tower is going in right now. They just finished the base foundation, and the tower is going to go up in the next probably 45 days. And that will light up the whole valley in terms of internet, cell phone. There'll be 2 carriers eventually, maybe 3 carriers. So a huge benefit to that area.
Excuse me, Mr. McLaughlin. Vice Chair, did I understand you correctly that you said your road guy said that he could not improve that road because of the cultural impact?
Yeah, BLM's not going to permit it without mitigation of the cultural sites.
This is, I'm sorry, this road right here where my mouse is.
Yep.
I think, yeah. The current road.
Okay, and so is your proposal to do a different road? Because I thought you were going to take the road that's existing is what I heard, and you're going to improve that one. You're going to do a different road?
The green line,
Okay, all right,
that avoids cultural sites.
okay. All right,
But
Okay.
that'll be the spaceport that does that, not the county.
okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yes, Mr. Chairman, that will be our road to maintain. It still allow public access through the spaceport. Yeah. Okay, and then the next one is just existing road condition.
If you're a four-wheeler
Four-wheeler.
or a dirt bike.
So again, just improvement of roads on site, and because of you can see the construction detail on below that, just trying to get roads that actually will survive a rainstorm. And a lot of our roads aren't like that right now. We did do a lot of improvements this would have been with state money last year in the VLA. So those roads are significantly improved, but this is an example of what the roads can look like after a rainstorm.
Can I ask a question about this? When the road system was laid out for the spaceport, did engineers actually take this kind of possible condition into consideration when they said, let's put a road here where where the water's going to run?
Mr. Chairman, no, I don't think so. I think what they mostly used were roads that were already there that the ranchers had on fence line or BLM roads or county roads. So there are a few interior roads that we laid out, but at least in the VLA, we've already improved those. But there are other ones down south and in the spaceport that still look like this. Part of the problem is because we're using the roads more, they tend to degrade faster.
Do you have a plan for eventually how many roads you're going to need and where you're going to need them? I mean, have you actually scoped that out with engineering, surveying, or anything?
So, Mr. Chairman, the detail on the bottom where you can see where we're trying to shed water and we're trying to direct the water, we do that on a per road. We are doing a water study of the HLA, is that right? VLA, I think we already did one. We have that also in the budget for the HLA to do some more water mitigation, but the VLA, we're doing a water study. So the answer your question, we were trying to do a much better job of only having to do this once.
So if you go back to the previous slide, am I reading that?
Yep. That's all?
Yeah, are all those red spots where the water's gathering?
No, Mr. Chairman, the red spots are where the cultural mitigation is required.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so the water's gathering, I guess, where the black areas is that?
The dark areas are where the arroyos are, yeah.
Yeah, that's where the water's running. Okay, thank you.
But these little gullies that Chairman Paxton talked about, Commissioner Paxton talked about are, they don't look like anything until it rains, and then you got a foot of water in them.
And then there is no roadway.
Yeah, and then there is no roadway. So it's been an ongoing problem. Okay, and then the final one is the HLA entrance. So, Mr. Chairman, this has been a problem, although there was a considerable amount of engineering that went into designing that entrance. They failed on a couple of things, and the biggest one is that wide trucks, long trucks, and low trucks cannot get through that easily. So this is a draft. We haven't done a final design, a draft to just realign that front so we can get stuff through there. I guess they thought, this is 15 years ago, that they had a good plan, but it hasn't worked out very well. So we bring them in on a separate gate, basically, but we want to do something a little more efficient. The other thing that's part of this is has everybody gotten to go out on a launch day for Virgin Galactic? Yes. So you've seen that, kind of depends. Sometimes there's 100 or 200 people out there. Sometimes there's been 500, 600 people out there. So those people all come in buses. And that's going to be a very regular event, in about a year and a half, we hope. So bringing those people in and doing that efficiently at the same time we're hosting all the activities of our other customers has been a bit of an issue too. So this is a realignment of that front gate so we can keep good security, which is required by our FAA license and our customers, but allow, again, low, long, and wide trucks to go through. So, and I think that's all I have for that.
All right, any other questions from anyone on the board?
Mr. Chairman, I have one. So Scott, you presented a number of different projects, and I like them all. Would you prefer that excess pledge revenues go towards design and planning, or more of the construction side?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioner, it's really everything. The statute allows that it goes to the planning and design and engineering and the construction. So the projects I've listed, some of them have had a little bit of engineering applied to them already, so we have an idea of the cost, but the idea is to complete all these projects, so there'd be planning, designing, and construction, if that answers your question.
It does, and then, Mr. Chairman, if I just follow up on that. My thinking is whenever you guys go for capital outlay and you ask the legislature and the governor for funding, and the counties run into the same thing, most of the time the first question is, what do you have the designs? Do you have the planning done? And so if it's more advantageous for the spaceport and asking for larger pools of money from the legislature, I would see having excess revenues be used towards long-term planning and designing. I see that as very beneficial to the spaceport. And one thing that I did see on your guys' list was the environmental surveys for archaeological and other, I'm assuming just NEPA.
Sorry, guys.
Is that for just the project, that 700,000, is that just for the projects that you listed, or for just kind of an all-inclusive overlooking the entire spaceport?
So, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner, you hit on two good points. One is that a whole bunch of the site has been surveyed, but it hasn't been mitigated. So if you want to build on it, you have to go back and do the mitigation, which can take, depending on the environmental parts of that site, could be a lot. So we're trying to get ahead of that. We're trying to do the surveys and a little bit of mitigation where we think where we're going to expand next, where a customer might want to expand next. So that's what that 700,000 is for. The other thing is, you're right, and I've gotten an earful several times now about our capital outlay, and again, Rod is here to help spend it faster. But to get ahead on that, we're also trying to do the A&E, the architecture and engineering ahead of time. Make sure it's as shovel-ready a project as it can be, and then when I get the money from the state, we can move on it quickly. So that is now how we're trying to operate, yes.
Exactly. And Mr. Chairman, just one last thing, and it's not a question, for just more of a comment. Well, and the reason I asked for this to be put first on the agenda is to hear just exactly this. I know since I've been on the Spaceport Tax Board, we've kind of discussed this partnership between the Tax Board and the Spaceport Authority of how we're going to most advantageously use these excess revenues. And then so I know in the past, Scott and I have had discussions about, well, what kind of projects are you looking for? Can we have a list of those and give us a presentation on what the benefits of those projects are? What is the return on the investment for Spaceport and for the two counties? And so, Scott, I very much appreciate this. I was excited to see it on the agenda, and certainly one that I hope that we as a tax board can move forward with and put some money on the ground, because that's my goal in this. As I talk to my constituents, they understood that they paid and they passed the GRT tax for 20 years. And anytime we can put some money towards expanding and building on the spaceport, I think is advantageous to the two counties. And so I very much appreciate this. I'll be honest, when those bonds are up, I think I won't be on the commission. But if I was, I think I would have a different story, because at that point, the 20 years has been up. That's what my constituents have voted for, and after 20 years, if the spaceport's not self-sustaining at that point, I think, again, I'll have a different terminology, different perspective. But where I sit right now, these are the type of projects that I'm excited about, that I would like to see the excess revenue go towards. And again, it should be developed by Spaceport. Spaceport has the understanding of what they need to expand their customer base, to expand their revenues. As a tax board, I think we still have that oversight of saying, Scott, this is not a real life example, but I don't think the VLA development is the best use of the money. That's where we come in. But I think it's Scott and Spaceport Authority's job to say, here's what we need, and then to convince us that that is what they need. And that is a wise use of the money. So I foresee Scott and Spaceport doing their role in that partnership, saying, here's what we see as needs for the spaceport. Here's the return on them. We're asking you guys to do your job and put up the money or decide not to. Mr. Chairman, I will just leave it at that. Scott, thank you for the presentation. I appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Director Sanchez.
Thank you. Scott, do we have commitments that are contingent upon any of these? Like, I look at the expansion of utilities, you talked about the hangars, we talked on several things that we want to expand, but do we have any deals that are contingent upon that, or would Spaceport lose out on this if say, the tax board were to not concur?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, I'll let Francisco answer that question.
Thank you very much, Director Sanchez, and with your permission, Mr. Chair. In my role, I have found in instances the lack of infrastructure to be, the way in which we present it to our customers or potential tenants is, these are the number of things that you can do. If they request for a hangar, or if they request to have access to utilities, or if they request to have even something as basic to electricity in some areas of the VLA, it is an additional cost that is imposed on them, and that is an additional thing that they have to consider, that if another spaceport or another area has access to that, puts us in a disadvantage. So what we try to do typically is try to convince them as much of the reasons of airspace-wise, workforce-wise, and potential, if you have the commitments, right, to the customers of putting some investment, putting other things, we can get them on board with some of the additional other things that we can build. As you know, we cannot build just for a single customer, We need to build for an array of different customers. But as part of that, I think that going along the lines of where we already know we need some infrastructure, such as Scott is presenting to you right now, that goes along the lines of some of the requests that we've had.
Okay, thank you. So I guess the answer is you don't have a number or even a number of people that either deals have been lost or that are contingent upon this happening.
To put it as an actual causal on how many of those are because of the lack of infrastructure, it would be very difficult for me to put it. But I do know that there have been instances in which, like, well, you don't have a hangar. And we currently, for instance, had a customer that we had to say to that specific customer, you know, we don't have a hangar. We don't, for the foreseeable future, we're not going to be able to build you one. So if you want to come here, and that customer wanted to come to the Spaceport, you need to build your own. And that's easily a $1 million cost additional to some of the things that they have.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate that clarity. The reason I ask is because we have that excess funds out there. But I don't think, and I appreciate a point that Director Day had mentioned, which is, what is that impact? I did not hear in the presentation what the impact is. I heard generics, and this is where you want to build Spaceport America to be. But I don't know in that presentation where I can say the Stark would bring X amount of visitors or X amount of dollars. The expansion of utilities, the new VLA road, the new et cetera, et cetera. Aside from construction dollars that would, or GRT that would be created by the actual construction of this within Spaceport America, I don't know what's actually going to be coming to Spaceport America or what we could potentially see in revenues that will affect the GRTs. And I think that's where I'm looking at it is when I look at this, like I said, it's like if I were to give a catalog, the old, to use an old terminology, if I give a JCPenney catalog to my kids and said, pick out what you want for Christmas, they would give me a wish list here. And that's what I see this as. But I don't see how every one of these items will turn into potential future investment. Now, I'm jumping ahead to your presentation. And I know you talk about how much Texas is going to be putting into space and that industry. And I'm assuming, without context, as I just looked at the slides, it's around the fact that they're investing, and that's where we need to be. My concern is that Texas has a significant amount more, it seems to me, and I could be wrong, but it seems they've had a significantly more amount of private industry that's come in than we have here in New Mexico. Most of everything in the slides that you have here about the space, this is the place for space, is directed around governmental agencies, not around private industries. And I think what we need to continue to look at here is how do we grow in the private space industry? We see VG retracting in building on to the next phase. But where did their facilities go? They went to Arizona. We're just not seeing, that's my concern is, while I want to support the growth of space here because it is a competition, it's a growing industry, but I don't see, again, where each of these ties to what could potentially be bringing in monies to Spaceport America from private investment. And I think that's where I would love to see that in order for me to be able to be on board with any of these projects that I see, to understand, okay, if we put this investment, this could potentially get us this. If we invest in this other one, it'll potentially get us this. And I think if that was the case, I could then make a value proposition, because what I hear a lot from my constituents, and I had a constituent meeting not last week, the week before, and they do not see an impact. They do not see the benefit of continuing to fund Spaceport America. I know that doesn't change, the bond is going to be there. But that's where my constituents are at, is that, you go in the northern part of the county. I know they were excited because we were going to be hoping to build that relationship with Spaceport America. We were going to see more, but the only thing we've been able to grow has been the STEM investment in the schools. And that's a valuable investment, but that shouldn't be the only thing we get is investment in the schools. That we should already be doing that, but I want to make sure that what we're looking at is going to be actual growth for the counties here in Doña County and Sierra County. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Director. Any response to that?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I can, a couple of things. You hit about, this is a large, complex public work project, right? And you hit upon a whole bunch of interesting things. So if you think about Texas, for example, part of the reason Texas is on the map is because NASA put mission control there, which was a political thing that happened way back in the 60s, right? The Johnson Space Center there is because Johnson wanted it there. And because that turned that part of Houston into a mecca of space, all government funds, not private funds, all government funds, Texas turned into a mecca for space. And if you go back and you look at silicon wafers, if you look at computers, if you look at all the technologies we use, GPS, internet, all of them were originally DoD projects. Some of them were NASA projects. And because of that, you wound up with the semiconductor industry in Austin. The TI came about because of defense, not because of private industry. The defense contracts got Texas Instruments rolling. Texas Instruments helped keep the space industry going. So you have to go back 50 and 60 years to see that it actually was government funded originally, and it was a government project. Now that we move forward, and to answer your question, I think we all realize that New Mexico doesn't have the best reputation for private industry in many respects. So when we lose out to something like the plant going to Phoenix or other things not being in Las Cruces, we have to look at ourselves and say, what could we have done? What could have the legislature have done and the GRT to encourage folks to come here? So I'm a New Mexican. I grew up in Las Cruces. I came back, oddly enough, because of the spaceport. Just because it was here. I didn't work here when I came back, but if you took the spaceport away and went back 25 years and asked yourself, what's different about Las Cruces now than 25 years ago? There's no new industry. We're starting to get a little bit of film, but there's nothing new going on. There's there's no place for an engineer to work. We have one of the better engineering universities in the school, and there's no place to work except for White Sands, which is probably smaller now than it was 20 years ago, 25 years ago. So I'd argue that as a public works, it's important that the government make the first investment. And for the type of companies we talk to, these are all early stage companies. These are companies that are working on a rocket engine or they're working on something. They don't have money and time to wait for us to put water and utilities and build a road. Some of them do. We are talking to, for example, some federal activities that could happen out there, and they have the money and the patience, but most of our customers don't. So like Francisco said, when they come and they say, do you have a hangar? And we say no, and a lot of times they say, well, can you put one up? You can build fabric hangars now for a few $100,000 or $1 million, depending on how big they are. It still takes time to do the cultural mitigation, to bring in the utilities, to put in the road. So we're trying to get ahead of where our market is and compete with the other spaceports that many of them are on airports. Mojave is a county airport, for example. So they tend to have more hangar space available and utilities in the ground than we do. So I think this is just a phase that we have to go through, especially in the HLA, to get that site. So we have quick move-ins by our tenants, and we'll keep attracting people. So.
Thank you. Any other questions from anybody? I have a question. How much money did you actually request from the state this year?
So, Mr. Chair, this year we asked for quite a bit, and we got enough to build the GTS roof, which I have on the separate slide. So we got a little bit of the hothouse because we got behind on our capital projects. But like I explained it, and when I started, we now have 3 people working on capital projects. We do have, I think it's about $33 million, Rod, currently in work that is state money. And I expect that when I go back next year and I'm able to show the progress, we will continue to get money, capital improvement money from the state. So that you were correct, that's another spigot that we draw on for doing these projects, and we think we'll be able to continue to use that, again, to build out the spaceport.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple things I'd like to add to that. The internet was actually started by ARPA, okay, which was actually prior to the defense fund you're talking about. And I know because I was there.
In
That's the
DOD?
reason. The other thing is, Mr. Director Day said that we all signed up for 20 years on the GRT fund. Actually, we didn't, and we didn't realize it, because if we started out, when we started out with 2009, 2010 bonds, the financing for that was actually going to pay for 20 years. It was a 20-year note. But the balloon payment required after that 20 years was $13 million. And without renegotiating the 2021 bonds, we would have still been on the hooks for $13 million, even in 2029, in the middle of 2029, when we finish paying the first bonds off. So that's something a lot of people don't understand. So renegotiating the bonds in 2021 in order to get a better rate and to combine the entire balloon payment and the balance and everything into one payment was actually a really good move on our part to do that. And I appreciate the support of Spaceport America and also this board in order to get that done. So any other questions for Scott on this presentation? Madam Chair, yeah, Director.
So Scott, and thank you for your comments down at the end, Mr. Sanchez.
Yeah, Sanchez.
Yes, Mr. Sanchez, thank you. I see two things that me personally, that I think is important, and I'm a infrastructure kind of a person. So the new horizontal launch south access road and utility extension, I think that would be important. And the utility expansion for the north horizontal launch area, and I know you talked about there were people out there that need that. You have people interested in that area. So could you just talk about these two items? Because I think those two items would help you bring in some new customers. And that's just my thought.
Yeah, Chairman and Director, one of the probably the most exciting and most important asset we have is the airspace, and that's unlike any other airspace, any other spaceport in the country. Every other spaceport is under FAA. A lot of them are in crowded areas. So if you look at the Denver Air and Spaceport, they're right next to the Denver International Airport. Their ability to launch and do anything risky is probably a decade or two in the future. Other spaceports like Midland, even Oklahoma have a similar problem, even though they're a little bit more remote. They have a lot of people out there, and they also can't do risky things. And there really is, Mojave may be the closest to us in terms of that. So the airspace, and then of course the second huge aspect thing we have is the runway itself. So, but if people can't get to the runway, they can't do anything. So that's again our goal is to provide hangars, additional hangars, and get the utilities in. So the companies that want to build their own hangar, they can basically just put them on the ground and have the utilities nearby and not have to wait a couple of years for us to work out the master planning. So in terms of the other areas of the spaceport, the types of things that can happen out there are varied enough. It's actually harder for us to get ahead of them. We want to make sure the road's there and the electricity's there, but we don't know exactly what they're going to do. The HLA, though, we know they need access to the runway. Yep. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so next item, I think that's all that. The next item on the agenda is to actually resolution to release all the funds being held in reserve by Doña and Sierra County above the 25% of the yearly amount needed to cover the current 2021 bond payments, approximately $1,155,384, which is the amount that's required to be in reserve based on the 2021 bonds. I'd like to first, I'd like to make a motion that we pass resolution approving this resolution.
I'll move approval.
Sorry?
I'll move approval.
Okay, well, I move for approval. You can second.
Okay, I'll second.
Okay, motion by me, seconded by Commissioner Sanchez. I'd like to read the entire resolution because I think it's relevant. Sorry, I didn't have my mic on. Okay, the resolution approving a policy to forward all of the 75% Spaceport GRT tax collected to the New Mexico Finance Authority to be applied toward the principal of the 2021 bonds. This is whereas this is whereas there is imposed on any person engaging in business in the district area of the county for the privilege of engaging in business in the county an excise tax equal to 1/4% of the gross receipts reported to required to be reported by the person pursuant to the New Mexico Gross Receipts and Compensating Tax Act as it now exists and as it may be amended. The tax imposed under the ordinance is pursuant to the County Local Options Gross Receipts Taxes Act as it now exists, as it may be amended, or shall be known as the County Regional Spaceport Gross Receipts Tax. And whereas the ordinance whereby adopts by reference all definitions, exemptions, and deductions contained in the Gross Receipts and Compensating Tax Act as it now exists and as may be amended, and whereas no county regional spaceport gross receipts tax shall be imposed on the gross receipts arising from A, transporting persons or property for hire by railroad, motor vehicle, air transportation, or any other means from one point within the county to another point outside the county, or B, direct broadcast satellite services. And whereas revenue from the county regional spaceport tax gross receipts tax will be used for the purpose listed below. A, 75% of the proceeds of this tax is dedicated to the regional spaceport district for financing, planning, designing, engineering, and construction of a spaceport or for the projects or services of the district pursuant to the Regional Spaceport District Act. And whereas in pursuant to the resolution of the district adopted on March 24th, 2021, 75% of the revenues of the county spaceport GRT pledged revenues are pledged for the payment of the authority's taxable gross receipts tax refunding revenue bonds, Series 2021, the Series 2021 bonds. And whereas 25% of the revenue is dedicated for spaceport-related projects as approved by the resolution of the governing body of the county, and whereas the pledged revenues from the fiscal year immediately preceding the closing date were equal to or exceeded, and on an ongoing basis during each year of the bonds are outstanding, are reasonably expected to equal or exceed 125% of the maximum aggregate annual debt service requirement. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the governing body of the Spaceport America Regional Spaceport Tax District that Section 1 bond payment, the 75%, the 75% entire sum of the tax collected by both Sierra County and Doña County shall be used to pay the 2021 bonds as required by the authority's taxable gross receipts tax refunding revenue bonds, Series 2020 agreement or contract, and reserve the estimated funds that shall be held in reserve to cover the required 125% each year to ensure payment of the bonds shall be $1,155,384. An amount that is 25% of the pledged revenue shall be collected from additional revenue from both Sierra County and Doña counties each month and held in reserve account to cover the 125% excess, or be held in account once the needed amount is collected until the 2021 bonds are paid in full. Section 3, payment toward 2021 bond balance. The additional revenue is to be sent directly to NFA on a monthly basis. Section 4, bond payment. Once the 2021 bonds have been retired, the reserve revenue may be used pursuant to New Mexico State Statute 5-16, 7, 8, and 10, adopted by the Governing Board of Spaceport Regional Spaceport Tax District this 15th day of 2024. The way I've read this, and then we got our signatures after that, what many people aren't aware of and what I've put into this resolution is that when we actually renegotiated the 2021 bonds, and what I've quoted on this resolution is the section that says part of our agreement to the 2021 bonds that we pledged all 75% of the money to pay off the bonds first before we have any excess revenue. So this is the agreement that I read verbatim from the one that all of us signed, including Spaceport America, including Spaceport District. So we have no excess funds until the bonds are paid off. Now, we can choose to pay them off for the next 5 years and keep this money in reserve, or we can apply them to the bonds that are going to pay off earlier, and then we'll have excess revenue from our obligation to pay the 2021 bonds. So all the actions that we take now, okay, basically, we can't do this until these bonds are paid off based on the agreement that we have when we negotiate those bonds. We can renegotiate the bonds with the New Mexico Finance Authority and change that obligation where we're obligated to use the money only for the 75% bonds, or the 75% only to pay the bonds. But until we fix that, we can't give you any of this money, is my opinion. Any comments?
Mr. Chair, just one, I guess, procedural question, and I'm someone who's always leery of the OMA, the Open Meetings Act. And I believe we have someone from the Attorney General's office on the call. Is there any issue with the language that was put on the agenda versus the actual verbiage on the resolution that we are putting forward? And then I guess I'll go to either someone, the Attorney General's office or Attorney Pato on the issue.
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
So if you look at the agenda, it's a resolution to release all the funds being held in reserve from Doña and Sierra County above the 25%, but then the title of the resolution is not the same or anywhere near that. And so I guess I'll refrain to our attorney for their opinion.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I believe we have Todd Barron from the Attorney General's office who's joined us via Zoom or WebEx. I don't know if we're able to admit him in. He's showing as unverified. Mr. Barron?
It looks to me like he's able to talk because he's not muted. So he's already on. If he wants to, if he's there and available, he can speak now. I don't think he's stopping him from speaking.
That's fair. Well, I'll address the question then by Commissioner Day. And again, as I made plain at the beginning of this meeting, I represent the two Sierra board members who are sitting here today in their official capacity as Sierra County officials, but not as, I don't represent this Spaceport district, just to be plain. And that's why I'd invited the Attorney General's office, who statutorily required to provide representation to this board, to join us today and to address this issue. I wish he would be here to join, but okay, well, all the same.
Well,
The Open Meetings Act requires that meeting notices include an agenda containing a list of specific items to be discussed or transacted at the meeting, or information on how the public may obtain a copy of the agenda. The following item, as Commissioner Day had noted, was listed by Commissioner Reynolds on the agenda. Resolution to release all funds being held in reserve by Doña Ana and Sierra County above the 25% of the yearly amount needed to cover the current 2021 bond payments, approximately $1,155,384. The resolution circulated by Commissioner Reynolds this morning for consideration by this district this afternoon, however, is entitled Resolution Approving a Policy to Forward All of the 75% of Spaceport GRT Tax Collected to NMFA to be applied to the principal of the 2021 bonds. As is evident by the difference in the titles of the resolutions, the action now proposed by Commissioner Reynolds is different from that which was published in the agenda. The public would not have had reasonable notice that Commissioner Reynolds was proposing to utilize all the 75% of the Spaceport GRT to be applied to the principal of the 2021 bonds by virtue of the item that was listed on the agenda. Rather, the public was provided notice that the board would discuss the release of all funds held in reserve by Doña Ana and Sierra Counties above the 25% of the annual amount required to cover the bond payments. Accordingly, consideration of the proposed resolution would constitute a violation of the OMA, and I would encourage this board not to proceed with further consideration of this resolution.
So, and Mr. Chairman, if I may, I believe on the screen Todd was attempting to speak, but he said he was not able to. So I believe he's trying, but he's not able to speak, whether it's on his end or.
Hello.
We may have-
Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello.
Okay. Yes, I've been trying to speak. For whatever reason, it's not letting me use the web interface, so I'm now on my phone. I apologize for any audio challenges here. But my assessment is in concurrence with Mr. Pato. The agenda item is not sufficiently descriptive to encompass this discussion, and certainly not to encompass any action that may be taken pursuant to this discussion. There's also concerns that I have that would need to be addressed offline about the interpretation of the resolution and the effect of bond defeasance. Paying off bonds early could be problematic, could be unauthorized, and it would certainly be something that the Board of Finance would have to green light. So for those reasons, I encourage this board to not take up this action and to discontinue any discussion of this item.
Todd, are you done?
Yes.
Okay. This is Chair Reynolds. Did you read the entire document for the 2020 fund bonds agreement?
So again, I'm not going to participate in a discussion about an agenda item that was about an item that was not on the agenda. That is not authorized by OMA. So that is a conversation that would need to occur either in another properly noticed meeting or offline.
I understand, sir. The reason I'm asking the question is because one of the comments you made was that we'd have to consider New Mexico Finance Authority and whether there would be a problem with paying off the bonds early. In the agreement, it actually states that there's no penalty for early payment of the bonds as part of the contract that we already signed. So that's why I was asking if you'd already seen it. Okay, now I'm still trying to understand specifically what the problem is here because, yes, I drafted this, yes, I put this together, but I'm still as confused as to what part of this doesn't go along with this.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Director Sanchez.
I think as I'm reading through, I'm trying to understand as well, because the way that I understand the agenda item, it is to release all funds that were collected, and the reason it talks about it is because above the 25% is the additional reserve. So in my mind, everything that was in the resolution is encompassed here. Now, it's not, I mean, unless you put the whole resolution on the agenda item to make it very clear and descriptive, you know, for in the case of releasing I guess an agenda that is not overly extensive, I don't know what the right, or just overly long, any longer than it needs to be. I guess I don't understand is it just a clarity issue? Is it, because like I said, when you go through the language, what I think in the end, it boils down to the same thing, is that what I think Commissioner Reynolds is saying, or sorry, Chairman Reynolds is saying is this should go, that we're releasing, not retaining, basically all funds that were collected in this fiscal year would be released.
Mr. Chairman, I might be able to provide that necessary clarification. Had Commissioner Reynolds listed this item that he's proposing here today, resolution approving a policy to forward all of the 75% of the Spaceport GRT collected to NMFA to be applied to the principal of 2021 bonds, that would have provided the public sufficient notice of the item to be discussed. That's not what Commissioner Reynolds did. What Commissioner Reynolds did was he listed resolution to release all funds being held in reserve by Doña County and Sierra County above the 25% of the yearly amount needed to cover the current 2021 bond payments, approximately 1.15. The public would have no notice that Commissioner Reynolds intended to apply 75% of the Spaceport GRT to the principal of the 2021 bonds by virtue of that original resolution. That's the problem. So there's not an issue of having to lay out an entire resolution in the notice, in the agenda, in the publication. No, simply to provide the public adequate notice of what the items to be considered and discussed by this board are.
Thank you, Mr. Pato. Now, the next question I have is, if that resolution was included in the agenda packet, could then not the public or someone in the public see the agenda item, look at the agenda item in the packet, and get the full clarification?
Commissioner Reynolds, when did you circulate the agenda packet, sir?
The packet actually was yesterday because there was no requirement to have the packet. According to our bylaws, there was no requirement to have the packet available until the meeting.
Does that address your
Okay.
question, sir?
However,
So this is Mr. Barron. So that right there answers the question and is the source of the problem. An agenda must be published 72 hours prior to the meeting. So if the argument is that the information in the package cures the ambiguity in the agenda that was published 72 hours, it obviously is an untimely clarification because it was less than 72 hours before the start of the meeting.
you are correct that the agenda had to be published at least 72 hours before the meeting. There was no requirement for the attachments to actually be provided until the meeting. So how is that a problem exactly?
That is correct, but the question that was being posed was whether having access to the board package cured the problem with the agenda? And the answer is no, because the board package was not available 72 hours. So the public did not have access to all of the information that it needed to determine what was going to be discussed today, at least 72 hours before this meeting. And that is the problem.
Okay, if I'm looking at this, and I'm not trying to dismiss what you're saying, what I'm trying to understand is it in looking at the resolution to release all funds being held in reserve by Doña County, okay, above the 25% that's yearly needed to accomplish the reserve for the bonds of $1,155,384. Is that not clear that we're going to release all the funds that are in reserve?
Chairman, I had raised this actually with Attorney Pato a couple of days ago because I saw that these are some complex items here. And honestly, I did not receive your packet until last night at 10:37.
That's correct.
So it really is not enough time for me or other people to receive the packet. 10:37, I'm not checking my email. 10:37, not trying to be disrespectful.
No, that's fine, that's fine.
But at 8 o'clock this morning, I checked my emails and printed that out.
And you're truncating, you're truncating the notice that was actually provided. It says to release the funds being held in reserve to cover the current 2021 bond payments. And what is now being proposed is to have those funds applied to basically cover the entire bond obligation, not just the current obligation. That's a substantively different proposal, and that was not the subject of the original agenda item.
Okay, I really want to make sure I get this right the next time. That's why I'm asking these questions, okay? Number one. Number two, I would still like to have a discussion with you offline about exactly how this violates the Open Meetings Act. So if you don't mind, I would appreciate a discussion later today or tomorrow sometime, or Monday.
So Monday would be good.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. And
Mr. Chairman?
yes, Director Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Pato, just curious, and I think along the same lines, and I'd wondering, does that mean if this applies to this action item, does this mean that every other action item here listed on the agenda will run into the same issue
No, sir.
due to notice, or?
No, sir, because those items were listed with specificity and provide the public adequate notice of the items to be discussed. The issue here again was the difference between the resolution that was circulated this morning is different and has a different title than that which was being proposed on the agenda. So the public did not have adequate notice as to those items that were going to be discussed.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Pato.
Mr. Chair.
Vice Chair Paxson.
I want to note for the record that the only reason that we're having this meeting today is because it was posted by Sierra County. And I did not receive this because I go to bed at 9:30. And I got up and I saw the package, and the day of the meeting does not give me time to review the packet that had 11 items in it, to be able to get up here and make decisions and discuss this intelligently. I want to protest that the board did not receive the packet in a timely manner in order to examine it, to consult with staff and legal representation.
Very well. Okay. Thank you, Vice Chair Paxson. I would like to address that, if you don't mind, for a second, to say that the resolution that we passed at the last meeting in September addressing what was required for publication for our meetings was actually that the agenda be published 3 days in advance. It said nothing about the packet and when it was delivered. Now, I would recommend that we go back and change that resolution so that we address that issue, because I am not in disagreement with you. Okay?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
the public is
Vice
not
Chair.
the board.
I'm sorry?
The public is not the board, and the board should have the packet in time to study it, to consult staff, and attorneys so that we are prepared to intelligently discuss and reach decisions.
Thank you, Vice Chair Paxton.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I think we're
Director Day.
kind of discussing two issues here. Number one, the packet, right? And the idea that I think we're all in agreement that receiving the packet the night before is not sufficient enough for us to review it. But more importantly, what I'm concerned about is the public not having that packet, the access to that packet. I think is another one of my concerns, because, especially when we're talking gross receipts taxes and dealing with, government money, we have to be very careful about how we're going about talking anything taxpayer money and making sure that we're crossing all of our T's and all of our I's. And so, while yes, I have concerns that the packet coming in real late, I have concerns about that, and I think that's something that could be easily addressed and easily fixed. My biggest concern, and then the reason I pose this, is I did not feel comfortable coming in and discussing this today because of just that language difference. And that's why I had the conversation with Attorney Pato, just asking that. And to be very honest with you, I would have been fine if our attorney and the AG's office said, nope, there is no issue, continue forward. I think it's a very important discussion to have, and one that we need to have. But we need to make sure we're crossing all of our T's and dotting all of our I's. And in the fact that someone from the AG's office is saying they're not going to participate in this conversation makes me take a step back even further and say, I don't want to touch this. Because the last thing we want to do is pass anything or even have any discussions on this, and then someone come back and say what you did was illegal, you broke the Open Meetings Act. That's just my concern in this. And so while yes, the packet issue is one thing and again easily addressed, my biggest concern is the OMI issue in this. And so while yes, that discussion needs to be had, and I support having that discussion, that discussion obviously cannot happen today.
Thank you, Director Day. This is akin to the resolution that was passed several years ago to release the reserve funds for operations at the Spaceport, which cost us $7 million. So I can share your concern about how important this is. And I would like to have the $7 million back that we spent on operations, was it 6 years ago, 7 years ago? So if there's a way to get that back in because of a discussion like this, that would be great. Now, anyway, are there any other recommendations on actions to be taken at this time from this board, from anyone?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Director Sanchez.
I just want to ask, and Mr. Pato, I think I would concur with Director Day and one of, you said based off of your recommendations, I just want to make sure that we're following the letter of the law, especially when it comes to OMA. Would it be appropriate here to either have a motion to postpone, or would it just be to withdraw the motions and continue on with the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, Director Sanchez, I might request that you direct the question to Mr. Barron. I have my opinions as to what would be best, but given that he's providing representation to this board at today's meeting, I'd prefer for the question to be directed to him if he's still available.
Mr. Barron, do you have a?
I'm here. Yes, and if discussion of the item that is actually described on the agenda were to occur, that would be appropriate, if that would have value to this board at this time. But if discussing it as it is stated, discussing what was contemplated by that agenda item, or what appears to be contemplated by that agenda item, does not encompass the subject of this resolution, then you can just move on to the next agenda item. You don't need to table, you don't need to vote, you can just, we've had our discussion on, and we're moving on.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Barron, I appreciate it. Does anyone else have any more discussion they'd like to have on the resolution to release all the funds held in reserve by Doña County and Sierra County?
Mr. Chair.
That's the one you're saying we can talk about, correct? Okay. Yes.
You can talk about, yes, Mr. Chair, you can talk about the proposal to release all funds to cover the current 2021 bond payments.
I'm sorry, okay, to cover the current 2021 bond payments. Okay, and that means the ones that are due now, not the future ones, correct?
Correct.
Or the principal? Okay, thank you.
That is correct.
Okay, so any questions?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Vice Chair.
a question for Mr. Barron. There was a motion and a second. Does that need to be withdrawn?
I didn't hear that, but if that happened, yes.
Yes, that happened.
Okay. All right, then, thank you, Mr. Barron. Then I'll withdraw my motion to approve resolution to release all the funds.
And
held
Mr.
in
Chairman,
reserve.
I'll withdraw my second to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Barron.
However,
welcome.
Mr. Barron, I have one more question on that. If we withdraw our motion, now we can't talk about the item, correct? Or we can?
No, you can still talk about item A because you're allowed to have a discussion about whether or not the funds held in reserve should be used to cover the current 2021 bond payments. That's what's on the agenda, and you can have that discussion.
Okay, anybody have any questions about that? Because I do have some comments about it. Okay. According to the agreement that we have to ensure that we have 125% of reserve of our money available to cover the current bond payments each year. That's something I don't think this board has ever addressed and made allowances for. Now, and that means that's a reserve fund that's required that we keep available so that in case the revenue collected by the GRT tax is insufficient to cover the bond payment, then that reserve is there and it's required by the contract of the current one that we have. Were you all aware of that? Is that yes, no? Anybody? Okay. Well, it is part of the contract that we've sufficiently, it's currently approved through the 2021 bonds. And I think it was in the previous bonds as well. I just don't think anybody ever addressed it. So that's something I think we do have to address. And since we don't have an item resolution to do it, I think it's something that we should address before we decide what we do with the other revenue. Okay?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Do we have anyone on the call from the New Mexico Finance Authority?
I don't believe so. I requested their presence, but they chose not to appear.
I guess I would recommend moving forward on anything that has to do with the bonds. They're obviously a player at this, they're at the table with us and Spaceport Authority on that issue. So I guess one of my asks moving forward is anytime we're discussing any bond issues, having someone, or at least asking, and it sounds like it may have happened, the request, but really working hard to get someone from NMFA on the call. And that way we have NMFA, Spaceport Authority, and the tax district all at the same table moving forward. So we can have these discussions because NMFA may have maybe a different opinion or a different perspective. So that's all I would ask moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Director Day. Mr. Pato, did you happen to review the documents quoting the sections that I was talking about at all?
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I wasn't.
About the commitment for the funds?
Mr. Chairman, I apologize, but I wasn't paying attention to that part of the conversation. I was.
The contract that we signed, it actually requires we keep a 125% yearly reserve available to cover the shortage on the bonds. Had you read that section of the contract?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, again, I want to be clear about my role here today. I represent Commissioner Paxson and Commissioner Day in their capacity as Sierra County Commissioners. I'd ask that any questions about the contract or any of the affairs of the Spaceport District be directed to Mr. Barron. Thank you, sir.
Okay. All right. So I think we're, for that, I guess if there's no more discussions about this item, anybody else have any questions or thoughts? Okay. Then I guess we can move on to the next item. Okay. All right. Next item, number 3B, rescind resolution 2022-001, joint resolution establishing collaborative approach to the expenditure of excess pledged revenues as it was never properly completed. I make a motion that we pass this.
I'll second the motion. I'd like to hear the discussion.
Okay. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I haven't actually looked back at those minutes. If I remember, is this resolution the meeting we had in Sierra County with very long discussion? With Mr. Savage also on the board at that time?
Yeah.
And then maybe one of the other board members can, has a better memory than I do. I was thinking we did not pass that resolution.
Yes. Director Day, it was passed by a vote of 3-1. But at the time, we didn't sign the documents, number one. Number two, we also have someone who was on the panel that was not actually authorized to participate. So we had some confusion with that. I mean, since then, we found out that the people representing the governor did not meet the requirements of the bylaws.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And that's why I put this on here, to basically clean up the paperwork.
Thank you.
If there's no other questions or comments, Brandy, would you call the roll?
Director Sanchez? Director Day?
Yes.
Director Skinner? Vice Chair Paxson?
Yes.
Chairperson Reynolds?
Yes. Okay, that motion carries 5-0. Next item on the agenda, a resolution to adopt the PATO recommended MOU to appoint someone at Doña County to provide administrative support with a stipend provided by Sierra County to help defray the cost of a contracted administrator for SARSTA. Okay. Can we read that in its entirety, or do you guys know where we're going with this? Well, can I get a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I hate to interrupt before you request the motion, or maybe you'd like to request the motion, get your second, and we can have our discussion. Apologize.
Mr. Pato, I think that we have to have a motion.
Yes,
And a motion and a second in order to discuss it as well.
Mr. Chairman, for the sake of discussion, I move to approve the resolution.
I'll second.
Okay, moved by Director Day, seconded by Director Sanchez. Yes, now, Mr. Pato.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, members of the board. Last year, I circulated, I believe it was in March of 2024, I guess it was earlier this year. Or no, it was actually in October of 2023, a draft MOU that outlined, much as your resolution does today, the duties that would be performed by the administrator. The resolution, though, I would ask that the board consider the MOU rather than the resolution approving some subsequent agreements. That way you can actually give effect to what it is you're looking to accomplish. So the MOU that I circulated, and I don't recall having received any revisions or any changes from Mr. Gooden or from any of the members of the district. I believe that would actually allow this board to move forward with securing that support. Let me look at the agenda, though, and again, subject to Mr. Barron's comment, whether or not that'd be permissible in light of the item that was on the agenda. I need to pull that up.
I don't believe he's on the call unless he's on his phone still. But the reason I put this on the agenda, I'll be clear, is because you notice that this says a resolution to adopt the recommended MOU strategy. That doesn't mean that we have a strategy. And if you read down into the details of it, it actually says that we are going to pursue the avenue of having each one of the counties approve an MOU. It doesn't actually establish everything about the MOU. The second page, the agenda item, or the second item, which is the Amendment A, Attachment A, actually just simply lays out some of the duties. And I wanted to have this board look this over and say, is this in fact the direction we want to go? So I brought it up so we could have a discussion of the item as much as anything else, so that we as a board collectively could seriously consider this so we can move forward on it. That's the reason I did it. And I don't think it obligates us to any agreement with MOU. I just think it obligates us to move forward with the process.
So, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, so the way I read this action item would be a resolution to adopt the recommended MOU. So that seems as though you'd be approving the MOU that had previously been circulated, and again, for which I'd received no revisions from Mr. Gooden or any of the members of the district. So I don't know if you all have a copy of that available to review today, so you can maybe fill in the appropriate details regarding what the compensation would be and all the pertinent details. I think I left spaces in that MOU to do that. But if you'd like to take a minute, I can go ahead and circulate that MOU to the members of the board, and you can look at that, or, but again, the item was the resolution to adopt the recommended MOU. So,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
if I may,
please,
and this is a
go-
question
yes.
for Attorney Pato from Sierra County Commissioner Travis Day. The MOU would have to go in front of the county commissions.
absolutely.
Okay, okay.
Absolutely.
I just want to be clear
Yes,
on that.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, okay.
It would be this board's, just to be clear, it'd be this board's approval of that form of MOU, which then would be approved by each of the independent boards of county commissioners. Because what it does is it's going to obligate the Sierra County Commission and the Doña Ana County Commission to fund a position, administrative support position. So yes, it needs to, it's an expenditure of those proceeds, of their general revenue.
Well, Mr., if I may on that, what I thought I understood from the chair was that Doña Ana County would take on that admin responsibility. And so wouldn't the correct process be both counties need to approve the MOU, and then Doña Ana County would have to have a contract with the Spaceport Tax Board to be the administrator on it? Is that the more appropriate process?
Commissioner Day, I don't know that I see any sort of issue with this board approving or adopting the form of MOU, which then would go to each of the member counties. I think that's more form over, or process over substance, and I'm not sure there makes it, I mean, as long as this board supports that, then it can report back to the independent boards of county commissioners that, hey, look, we support an MOU between the various entities to fund an administrative support position in Doña Ana County for spaceport assistance.
Thank you, Mr. Pato, and also Director Day. If you look at this, you're right, there's no amount that's decided on here. However, if we move forward with this process, it's my understanding that each board will actually have a chance to review this. You'll be able to say, yes, this is what we think it's worth, this is what we think it's worth, and we'll move forward with the process. And then we'll have to come back and probably formalize the acceptance of the MOU later. Right now, if you'll notice, this is actually adopt the process. This is kind of what we're saying here, and not actually adopting the MOU itself. That's at least that's my goal. Am I reading it wrong?
Mr. Chair,
Because this is your document, by the way, this is your document verbatim, as I pulled down from your MOU that you sent. The MOU is? Yeah, the whereas and everything. Okay, so this is the document that I received from you back in March. It was actually with Nelson. Nelson sent it to me.
Mr. Chairman, I don't remember drafting a resolution. I only drafted, if I recall.
Well, maybe Nelson took your MOU and drafted it into a resolution, maybe that's what it was, but anyway, that's where I got it from him, so, okay. But if you guys look it over, if there's anything you say that we absolutely shouldn't do, that's fine. If you agree that we should do it, then we'll vote on it, or we'll say, we'll postpone it and do something independently and then come back and do the same thing we're doing now.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Director Sanchez.
I think my only concern would be is that the actual MOU that we're agreeing to hasn't decided. I think that would be something that we should agree upon here between the board. So then, once we know what we're approving in an MOU, then that would go directly to the board. So it's an agreement at that point. And I think the other concern I have is that the MOU is not part of this agenda packet. I mean, if we're okay moving forward and trying to figure out the details now, that's fine, but I would feel better knowing that we have a final MOU in that we're approving that would be going to both counties for approval, so we know exactly what we're all going to see.
And Mr. Chairman, I think Director Sanchez kind of hit it on the head. Just to ensure that there's some consistencies between the two MOUs, that the two commissions are approving the same MOU, because not that it's gonna happen, but I mean, there's opportunity for, just because Manny looks at me wrong, I want to put something in our MOU just because he looked at me wrong. Just so that the two commissions are passing the same resolution, or the same MOU.
Yep, and that's actually, okay, when you're reading this resolution 2024, resolution approving a memorandum of understanding to allocate distributed funds to the Spaceport Spaceport Tax District to support an administrative assistant. If this is what we're trying to accomplish, can we look at this and see if we want to try to use this document as it is, or do we want to draft a different document and then adopt it as a resolution? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Mr. Chair,
Vice Chair, yes, sir.
the resolution is presented in this agenda is to adopt the Pato recommended MOU which I do not have at hand to review. It was not in the packet. I might have it at home in my records, but I can't vote on something that I don't have the document being considered.
Okay. So are you saying let's postpone this? Or,
Mr. Chairman, maybe a more appropriate approach would be to just, if we can, as commissioners, direct our attorneys to draft up the MOU, present it to each Board of County Commissioners, get each county commission board to approve it, and then bring that back to this board.
I thought that's
And
what we
then that
were
way
doing.
we're not, yeah, and then that way we're just not saying we're gonna postpone this effort. I mean, I think we can still give directive without having a resolution.
I thought, and I think, if I understand Pato correctly, Mr. Pato correctly, that he thought that's the way it was gonna go, is that you and Mr. Gooden would actually come up with a good option and offer it to us. And personally, I thought that you and he had already cooperated mostly on this to get to this point, since he represented it as such in the email that I received.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I believe I shared, and again, this is going back to October 2023, and I can't remember what I did last week, but I will say that I believe I shared with Nelson and with the members of the district the draft MOU. I'm not sure that I received any feedback from anybody with respect to the MOU. I don't think I heard anything further after that. I do think, however, that it would be appropriate it would be helpful for us, for me and Nelson, in preparing the MOU to submit to our respective boards of county commissioners, were we to have an understanding of how much we're looking at. I mean, so that way we can put out a number, and I mean, a number would help. I mean, if so, and that's not something that had previously been discussed. And I don't think I'd seen this $25,000 number or a cap of $25,000 before today's email. So I as long as this board gives some. And actually, I'm looking to the two members of the Sierra County Commission to give some sort of direction with respect to how much Sierra County is amenable to providing in support of this, whether it's consistent with, I don't know, or maybe this is something we take to each members of the board, each board of county commissioners, and secure clarification from them, and then come back and Nelson and I can visit about what numbers we had and whether or not that's acceptable to the Doña County Commissioner or not. I don't know. I'm a little bit, I'm struggling with how to present this in a way that we're not continuing to discuss this for the next 6 months. I'd like to be able to move this forward and, get you the administrative help you need, because clearly we need it. I think we all agree. I believe every member of this board agrees that this administrative assistance is necessary and needed. So,
It's pretty obvious.
so I think that maybe having a discussion on this board, it's on the agenda today for discussion and for an action. I mean, if you can give some clarification and direction as to how much you'd like to fund this position with, or how much you'd like to request that each board fund the position with, then we can at least take that back to each respective board and have them approve that.
Mr. Pato, thank you so much. I'm fine with that. Anybody have a thought? Because I know from our perspective, if we're going to actually have the asset in Doña County, how much we pay for the asset's almost irrelevant, because we could use one of our already existing employees or hire somebody. It's more what Sierra County thinks is reasonable for you guys to provide than it is for us to be concerned with it. That's my opinion.
And Mr. Chairman, I caught myself as I was asking for my two members to speak on what amount they would like.
Yeah.
Given that this is not an advertised meeting of the Board of County Commissioners, but a meeting of the Spaceport District, and so I didn't want to ask them. I'd rather the Spaceport District Board provide a recommendation of what Sierra provide and what Doña provide, and then that way we can take that recommendation to the board, and then to the Board of County Commissioners of Sierra County and the Board of County Commissioners of Doña County, and get their approval of that MOA. I think that'd be helpful for us moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Pato. What I'm reading in this, what I've got here so far on this resolution, is that we actually resolved to create a position that's going to cost us no more than $25,000 a year. I think that way we're limiting what we're going to do. And I think the question is that a reasonable amount that this, I think you're saying, is that a reasonable amount for this board to consider in order to secure some administrative services, whether some of the money comes from Sierra, some of the money comes from Doña County? Is that the amount we're looking at to say we want to limit what we put into this position to $25,000? Is that what you're asking? Because I think that's what I hear.
Partly what I'm asking, yes. So, I mean, certainly this board can set a cap, and I think that's helpful for both boards of county commissioners to decide the issue, but maybe it would be helpful as well for this board to make a recommendation to the Sierra County Commission as to how much of this position they should fund, and how much the Doña County Commission can fund, and that way we can incorporate that into the MOU and know that we're not going to have opposition from this board when it comes back to this board. I think that's what I think that'd be helpful to both me and Mr. Gooden.
Okay, any other thoughts, directors?
Makes sense.
So how, does anybody want to,
If it's 25,000, half and half.
No. No, the GRTs are 8 times higher in Doña than they are in Sierra County. When we had the discussion at that last meeting, you talked about taking it from the school 25%, and we objected to that just because it's political tenuous. And you talked at that time about 4,500 to 5,000 from Sierra County. That's my memory.
so are you saying that that's what you're willing to do?
That's going to take a vote of the Board of County Commissioners in Sierra County before we can affirm that.
All right, so let me ask you another question, a more generic question. Do you believe that paying someone $25,000 to provide administrative support to our board is a good number?
I recall that was your estimate, Mr. Chair.
I thought it was our discussion, actually, not my estimate, but I think we may have said, yes, I think 25,000 is good. Are you saying you're agreeing with that, or you think it should be more or less, or is that okay for what the board needs?
I wouldn't hazard a guess of what your administrative costs are down here. If you're comfortable with that number, then we can move forward. Okay.
Anybody else?
Mr. Chairman, I missed the last meeting, so I'm not sure where that discussion.
This was September a year ago.
It was only September, yeah.
The last September meeting I missed.
Well, that's right, you were getting.
We were waiting, I think.
Yeah.
Honeymoon.
Preparing to, yeah.
God, man. Where are your priorities?
Yeah, that's right, getting married. Come on,
My
let's-
fiance, now my wife, would have killed me. So.
No, I mean, I'd agree. I mean, I know, you know, I can see where Vice Chair Paxton has some hesitancy, but I'm open to, I think, working offline and then bringing it back to if we can come to an agreement between Mr. Pato and Mr. Gooden between what's presented to the commissions, and they get approval, then we can come back and approve both MOUs here at the board. But I like the idea of continuing to work until the next meeting so that we have something to approve in the next one.
So can I get a motion from somebody on the board?
Mr. Chairman, let me see if I can get this motion correctly. I move that we direct the two county attorneys to get together and develop an MOU that can be presented to both boards of county commissions that eventually will come back to the Spaceport Tax Authority Board to approve and finalize.
Okay.
Amenable?
I think it is, but I don't think that's actually a motion. I think that's just a direction, and I think that's a good direction. Okay. I agree with the directive in order to have you do it. We have to make a motion on this agenda item, and that's what I was looking for, a motion like motion to postpone.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, so now we have a motion to postpone from Director Day and a second by Vice Chair Paxton. Okay. Are there any discussions about that? Okay. So, Randy, could you call a vote? I'm looking at you, but you're not, I'm speaking to Brandy.
I'm trying to get my notes together here. Director Sanchez,
Yes.
Director Day,
Yes.
Director Skinner, Vice Chair Paxton,
Yes.
Chair Reynolds.
Yes. Okay, now, now I would like to entertain the discussion that Director Day said, which is we directed the legal counsel from both Sierra County and Doña County to get together and complete the process of finding an MOU that we can both look at. And I would also, if I'm not speaking out of turn here, would also like for the amount to not to exceed $25,000 for the position. And then let the boards so collectively decide how much each one of them are willing to put in and see if we can go there, okay? All right? Any other questions, comments? Okay. All right. Next item on the agenda, item D. Okay, report from Scott McLaughlin on current activities, economic impact. Kind of where I'm at.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair and Board. I'll try and be quick. There's two parts to this. I wanted to give you a status of the Spaceport, both in a little bit of activities, a little bit in the capital projects and the budget. And then I'm going to have Francisco come up and talk a little more about economic impact. So on page, I guess I got to do this again. So on page 3, just a synopsis. I didn't put a lot of pictures in, but just some quick things that are normal that we do and some of the bigger things we do. Of course, I'll talk about Virgin Galactic in a minute, but Virgin Galactic flew to space again in January. They have one more flight this year, and then I think you've probably read that they've pulled back a little bit, and they're concentrating on the 2 spaceships. And when they come back with the spaceships in a year, then they'll resume more of that kind of activity at the site. But I'll talk about that more in a minute. We've done quite a few STEM activities. We even had, I think, 60 students out for the last launch, which was a great thing. So I think most of them were from Sierra County, but we had some. We also had some from El Paso, right? So that's been a big push to try and get students into STEM. So that's an ongoing thing. We've turned into a bit of a UAV site test, again, because of the restricted airspace in the wide open area. So that's basically an ongoing thing with customers. We have a company that we get companies that come out and want to use the runway and use the site. So we've had one using battery testing, handling testing, and other things that are going on there. And that's, again, been kind of regular for us now. We continue to be a venue for photo shoots and film shoots. So it's just a way to drive revenue when we're not impacting the aerospace development. At the same time, it kind of fills up hotel rooms in the area, both in Sierra and Doña County. Some of the other more mundane activities, I guess, are me going to Santa Fe and others making presentations to the House Appropriations Committee and the Senate Finance Committee, the LFC. We also participate in Aviation and Aerospace Day to Capitol. So that's an attempt to get the legislators together and talk about aviation and aerospace together and what the future of that looks like. And that was pretty successful. I already talked about the cell phone antenna. We're continuing to work on an orbital reentry license. So I don't know if everybody understands it, but we have a license from the FAA to be a horizontal and vertical. That's right. And those, let me explain a little bit about that. So in a lot of ways, we're an industrial park. And in some ways, that's a good way to think about us. And at this industrial park that we have, you can get a license from the FAA to launch a vehicle. So in the heyday, when the Spaceport got started, we got a horizontal launch license and a vertical launch license. And what you have to do with FAA is you have to do an EIS. You have to create some partners to talk about the land use and the impacts. You also have to have a representative vehicle, and the representative vehicle has to be shown that it can fly safely from the Spaceport. And if you do that over the course of about 2 years, you can get a launch license. So we have a launch license for horizontal and vertical. Those can go to space and go to orbit, all the way into orbit, or they could be suborbital. So what we're working on right now is a reentry license, and we have an MOU with Sierra Space, which hasn't been in the news a lot, but Sierra Space is building a small winged vehicle that, if you remember the $6 million man, it kind of looks like that one at the start of that, and it's called a lifting body. It will take off vertically from the Cape, but it will land like the space shuttle did, and we're trying to be a site for that. Their business model right now is just a single vehicle with several trips to the space station. But as they expand it, they'll have a class of vehicles. They could have 3 or 4 different vehicles. This one they're sending to the space station is not human rated. It's cargo, but the next one will be human rated. They'll also have bigger versions of that. Right now, there are 4 private space stations being designed, and that will be up in space in sometime in a few years. And one of the things that Sierra Space would like to be is the ambulance for space stations, because they don't land in the water, and the G-forces when they come in are much lighter. They also have a bigger vehicle that could be a factory and with drugs in space. And so again, our airstrip and the ability to come down in a remote area is very advantageous for them. So we're trying to get the reentry license for them. We also have had some DoD interest in our site as a reentry site. And there's also a company that's doing the same thing with capsules where they're going to manufacture in space. And so we're talking about how we could handle them somewhere in the area. It wouldn't be right at the spaceport. So reentry license is very high on the business development side of what we're trying to do. We also, you may have seen that the UTEP Aerospace Center won the grant from the National Science Foundation. So we were involved in, the Spaceport was involved in one with El Paso and one up north with what we call the Space Valley Coalition. The Space Valley Coalition did not win, although they did win some money to keep the coalition going and to increase the amount of collaboration that we're trying to create. But the UTEP did win, and so we're in a partnership with them where they'll be able to come up to the spaceport and use the spaceport more often and easier. So that was a win for the region, not as much of a win for all of New Mexico, especially northern New Mexico. But as we'll talk about in a minute, Space Valley, anything we can do to build a Space Valley, I think, is good for all of us. Moving on, one of the things I think I presented last time was the amount of maintenance that goes on at the site. We are our own municipality, so we have our own water, we have our own electricity, our own fiber, our own roads. So there's a tremendous amount of maintenance. So one of the things we're implementing is the computerized maintenance and management software. So that's just a piece of software that tells you that you need to do something on a piece of hardware a year from now or 2 years from now. And what that will allow us to do is to build up what our actual maintenance budget is for the site. And as you know, Commissioner Reynolds, the GRT excess pledge revenues, we're determined not to be used for operations, although I would add that the operations of the spaceport in the past were primarily design, planning, building, and engineering. We didn't have a lot of customers in the past, but the operations of the spaceport right now are very much with the customer operations. So once we figure out more about the maintenance requirements of the site, that would be something that we continue to probably get from the general fund and from the state. But implementing that piece of software is still really important for us. It hadn't been done before. We have a vertical launch rail, again, trying to attract customers. That's almost complete. We already talked about roads and the master plan. So the master plan has been underway for almost a year. We had a meeting in TRC, the last of our public meetings that went really well. Probably, I think there were about 35 people there. And so we're waiting for our master plan contractor. Director Skinner was there. And so that's a big thing for us, and we'll release that sometime in the next probably 60 to 90 days where the public will then get to see what that looks like on the master plan. So getting back to Virgin Galactic, the way the news kind of came out was a little bit unfortunate because it really did make it sound like Virgin Galactic had a extreme cutback in a lot of ways, especially for New Mexico. But in reality, they still have 200 employees in New Mexico, and they're still contributing very significantly to our economic impact. What they did decide to do, and part of this understanding from the earnings reports that they have had, is they're concentrating on building the Delta-class spaceships. And this is an image from their earnings report that shows the factory in Mesa, Arizona. So you can see it's kind of hard to see on the dark area, but it shows 3 spaceships on the left side and 1 mothership on the right side. And what they had announced on the most recent earnings report was 3 to 5 spaceships per spaceport. Their business model is kind of extending out. Spaceport America is the first spaceport, but they're looking at other spaceports around the world. But each spaceport right now, with their business plan, would have 2 White Knight spaceships and 3 to 5, or I may have that number wrong. I think it might be 5 or 6 spaceships. And the goal is to get to near daily operations. And so Sierra County knows that they have proposed an astronaut campus. I have not heard a lot about that lately, but I think when you're trying to run a flight to space literally every day, and the training is about 3 to 5 days, I think, you have now 3 or 4 cohorts moving through in different levels of their training simultaneously. And so there's going to be a tremendous amount of activity in Sierra County for the astronaut campus, and I'm sure that extends to Las Cruces. And to maintain 2 White Knights and 5 spaceships, I hate to say, I don't want to be the one to estimate what the numbers will be for Virgin Galactic, but it's going to be considerably higher than it is right now. And so that's just with our one tenant. So we're excited that it's a little slower than I think we all would like, but it's showing good progress, and we're excited about the idea of having weekly launches out there and daily launches. So I put the website for the investor website for Virgin Galactic, and you can go back and hear the presentation. It's kind of like a phone call, and you can download their PowerPoint and go through all that. And I think it's quite valuable to go through the words that came out of Michael Kohlglazer's mouth in terms of the CEO and the CFO. So it's always good to hear it straight from them. The next slide, just to give you an example of a company we had out at the Spaceport, Intuitive Machines. And they landed at the Las Cruces Airport. I like this picture because they show the organs in the background, but the picture on the very front of the presentation is when they were out at the Spaceport. And it was a laser range finding system that is now on the moon. And it was a customer we also couldn't talk about, and that's the hard thing for us is we have a lot of customers and we really can't say much about when they're out there. Luckily, we often get to talk about it later, but this is a nice one. And literally something that was tested out at the Spaceport has made it to the moon. Now, it didn't turn out to be the greatest landing. They tipped over at the very end, but it's still pretty exciting. The Thunderbirds, page 6, this is a picture from one of the F-16s looking at the other F-16s. So we had them out there for 2.5 weeks, and that was the third time. Really good economic impact to the area, and we're talking to them about next year and the years following. So kind of a fun customer. To one of the reasons we want to get the viewing lots moved over when we build the Stark, so we don't lose the ability for the public to watch this. The Thunderbirds do not like showing off early in the training because they're literally, this is the beginning of their new flights with new pilots. But later on, they're not too upset about having the public out there to watch, so we'll advertise a little more. Page 7 is the Spaceport America Cup. We're on track to do that the third week of June. Again, somewhere around 1,800 to 2,000 college students from literally all over the world will be out in Las Cruces. We fill up the convention center. In fact, it's, I think, one of the largest events that the convention center now has. And if they were a little bigger, we could probably use the room. We now do the awards ceremony in the Pan American Center on the following Saturday. So, but in between those, the Tuesday opening and the Saturday closing, they launch at the Spaceport. So all the students in this picture are out at the Spaceport. Many of them stay in T or C, and a lot of them here. And we look at this as both an outreach, a STEM event, a workforce event, but it's also an incredible marketing event. All of these students, I mean, all of us from this area, how many people have we heard? I've driven through Albuquerque, or I've driven through Las Cruces, right? Because we have the interstates. Oh, I didn't stop, but I drove through. Well, there's 2,000 people that stopped in Las Cruces for almost a week. And many of these extend their stay either at the beginning or the end, and they go visit Carlsbad Caverns, or they go to Santa Fe, or visit the hot springs. So a really, really nice event. Moving on, here are the capital outlay projects. This is slide 8. So these are all the currently active capital outlay projects. I think these are all funded by the state through our ICIP request. As I mentioned, the only one that was granted this year was the $3.2 million for the Gateway to Space roof replacement, and basically a maintenance activity. The roof is almost 15 years old. It's also a little bit dark in the sun, and I think it's wearing faster, the type of material it is, so we'll replace that. And if you have any questions on any of these others, I'd be happy to answer them. And that's, again, Rod is here, our head of capital outlay. On the next page is our overall operating budget. I don't know, I think the most notable things are the operating revenue. What's listed as operating revenue is actually customer revenue. So, you know, as a public entity, at least on the operating side, we're funded almost $7.5 million by our customers. And the $4 million down there below comes from the general fund. So we're something on order 65% self-funded. I think it's everybody's goal to see that operating revenue, the customer revenue number go up, but I don't know that we'll ever get to the point where we're 100% self-sufficient. But, you know, this is a pretty good number, I think, considering the impact we have on the area and the state. And now I think I'll bring up Francisco to give a quick talk on the economic impact. We talked about it a little last time, but we wanted to try and talk a little bit more about it in terms of the overall market and where we are as a spaceport compared to other spaceports in the industry. So I'll let Francisco speak.
Thank you very much, Tax Board. And just as Scott is mentioning, what my intention was here was to provide further context into where we are at in terms of the general space economy, not just for where we're located in the regional economy, in which is the local impact that we have, but also at the state level, potentially at the national level, and also at the international level, some of the perspectives and ideas that I want to be circulating, along with some of the effects that we have been able to measure with our partners at CBED with NMSU. So based on that, that first slide right there, that's a slide that I downloaded, well, that I put together from the graphs from the BEA, the Bureau of Economic Analysis. That tells you the estimates that the Bureau of Economic Analysis currently has for the space economy in 2021. So what they're estimating in 2021, which is 3 years ago, right, was approximately to be $211 billion. So it has been growing, and one of the key one of the key aspects that you can see on the panel on the right, upper right, where you can see some of those changes, you can see that one of the ones that is changing and is quite interesting is the government aspect. And maybe I want to provide a little bit of information in terms of this. In the aerospace industry, at least because I was completely new to the aerospace industry, there is a combination of private and public funding, right? And the aspects on the public funding are actually quite notorious. So for instance, funds would not go to support a project unless they have a contract on something that is of interest to DoD or to DOE or to NASA or to some of those additional public customers, which is not always the same in all industries, right? There are industries in which the private capital is the private capital and you go through your idea, but in the aerospace industry, in many cases, seeing growth in the public sector is what drives the growth in the private sector, at least from my perspective, right? The new inclusion of what I'm seeing, that is a major thing, right? Whenever there is a capital funder that is going to be funding a project and that project has already public funds, that's when they start like being conducive of funding those projects. Like it can be a DoD or a project or a DOE, those types of projects. So seeing the growth that we saw actually in 2021 was actually quite good. We actually, from the expectations that I've heard, is that currently with the interest rates being so high, the public aspect has even taken a bigger role, right? So landing those projects with NASA, landing those projects with Space Force, landing those projects with DoD or DOE, that type of customers actually make it better or more viable for some of those projects. So we're keeping an eye out for those types of projects that we want to bring to the spaceport, to test at the spaceport. One additional thing that we added right there is the expected growth that Morgan Stanley has put for the aerospace industry in 2040. And they're expecting that it will grow up to about $1 trillion, and this is in the U.S. economy. One aspect that I want to notice and start going a little bit more regional.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Payares, but I just had a question. You go back, and I'm curious because your chart, if you go back one slide, your chart on the upper right-hand side does not tie to your comment from CNBC, where you said the space economy was growing at the fastest rate in years, but yet the space economy real growth as a whole contracted by minus 0.4%. Is that correct? I mean, I don't understand the context of saying it grew, but then the data says it contracted.
Different sources, right? So the CNBC, usually what they use is that they can get a larger type of image of what is the space economy. Typically the BEA, what it does is that it goes to a more tangible, the ones that they can actually denote of the ancillary industries that are supporting the space industry. So that's why those two numbers can be different.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Talk a little further back because you're. Oh, but the other to answer, if I may, there was a contraction due to COVID also, and there was a little bit of a dip. But how many of you saw Starship fly yesterday in the news? This is the world's largest object that ever has gone to space. The SpaceX Starship, that heavily funded by NASA, while SpaceX is funding it. It was also funded by NASA because right now, that's the spaceship that's supposed to take people to the moon. But I think that lends to what Francisco is saying, that in the aerospace industry and the space industry, the federal government still often puts a foot forward in getting things moving, but the private industry is adding more and more money. Like I said, the 4 private space stations that are going to be operating sometime in the next several years.
And I'll just start from here. I think it's better rather than leaning like this. I'll just be louder. So in terms of the space economy, one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that Mexico, right, the country right next to us, is also putting a foot in the aerospace industry, particularly in the development of the manufacturing side of the space economy. And we can actually, you can see that the state of Chihuahua, which is where the state of New Mexico, and particularly in the crown jewel of the state of New Mexico manufacturing side, which is Santa Teresa, can play a crucial role in this aspect, right? Because there's an aerospace cluster in Chihuahua City, there's an aerospace cluster in different places in Mexico, but that direct connection that can occur through Santa Teresa, right, it plays a crucial role when we're discussing about the space economy. Regionally, we're located very, very close. Additionally, oops, I'm going backwards, there we go. Our other neighbor, in this case, Texas is putting a lot of money in the aerospace economy. As a matter of fact, they have 2 of the major economic players, 2 of the major companies that are economic players in this industry, right? They have Blue Origin, which is not far from here, and they also have SpaceX in their testing site in Boca Chica in Texas. So when we think about it, when we consider all of this, we have to start thinking strategically as to how we start seeing ourselves as New Mexico and how we play a role in the aerospace economy as a greater aspect. We have a role to play, right? There's very few places in the United States that would be able to carry this by themselves. One of those would be Florida, in which you can have the manufacturing, you can have the testing, you can have the development, you can have the research, you can have all of those aspects in one area. Sure, that's Florida, right? But all others that are trying to play a role in this industry, including ourselves, including Texas, including Mexico, need other assets to be complementary of each other in order to make this happen. So one of the additional things that we were going to be mentioning today was the heavy investment that Texas is putting onto this, and that announcement that they're going to be putting a fund for $350 million into it. Not just that, but we're observing this even in our own region, right? With the grant that NSF was able to provide to UTEP and the UTEP project. And one key aspect that we thought about that is like, how do we make Southern New Mexico, Sierra County, Doña Ana County, and Spaceport America still play a role even in that aspect? So when we thought about this, we partnered not just with the Space Valley Coalition to submit our own grant proposal, but we also partnered with the UTEP proposal so that we can still have money flowing from that grant into Southern New Mexico, into the space economy here located. Speaking of Space Valley, and I think Scott had mentioned some portions of Space Valley. Space Valley is from El Paso, well, it's from Los Alamos to El Paso, right? I think that and maybe this picture shows you a little bit more. I think that we currently, if we collectively bring together the assets that are located in the state of New Mexico, from Los Alamos to Sandia Laboratories to White Sands Testing Facility, with whom we're currently working on to try to establish a Space Act agreement so that we can collaborate with them and provide further services to our customers. Spaceport America, of course, and then we're playing a key role in regional partnerships. One of the regional partnerships that we're also building with is with MRVDA, right? Middle Rio Grande Economic Development Alliance. And we are gonna be going to different shows and symposiums and all of that, taking materials from them and pushing for properties that they could do this. We're gonna be doing this with Mavida as well. Actually, we're gonna be planning on joining Mavida there's a conference that is a drone conference in which we're gonna be going jointly with Mavida. And we're also going to be trying to collaborate more with these regional entities to those small wins that before we could not see how we could integrate. We're trying to integrate it much more, right? Again, trying to see where we have the benefits and the assets on the different areas in our local economy and bringing them in order to make it more collective and try to land it and be able to compete with some of the greater areas. Besides this, This portion is just to provide you with some general context of the space economy, the regional aspects, and how we play a role in there. But when we start discussing about the economic impact analysis, well, we start discussing into the actual portions that we have. And here we actually partner with CBED, which is the Center for Border Economic Development, and the Arrowhead Center at New Mexico State University, which actually was the same center that conducted the economic impact study for Santa Teresa not many years ago, actually. So actually, I think that they're still going to be assisting Santa Teresa in providing their economic impact study as well. So they assisted us, and actually we have invited them in case there's any questions about the project as the authors. Dr. Kramer Winningham, right here located, is also joining us in case there's any specific questions to the study in itself. But what is an economic impact study? An economic impact study is a net economic effect that comes from a shock, right? In this case, the operations of the spaceport. And what are some of the things that are going on through those? Those are captured in three major aspects: the direct effects, which happen specifically in the region in which it is happening, the economic effect that is affected by the economic activity directly in the geographical area. You have the indirect effects that are associated to the ancillary industries that are supporting that activity, right? If I put the example of wineries in Napa Valley, right? Wineries are the direct effect, and the labels and the corks and some of these others, right, are the indirect effects that would go into it. Or maybe even the printers that are printing the labels to go into the wines. That would be the idea to think of this. And then we have the induced effects. And the induced effects are those effects that are related to the jobs and the number of times that, let's say that you have a customer that came to the spaceport, was employed for a period of time at the spaceport and stayed in one of the hotels and paid for the staying of the hotel and the waiters and all of that. All of those salaries would go back re-injected into the economy. That is part of the induced effects as we have it. So this is from CBED, what was fed into the model in order to create the economic impact analysis. We tracked the expenses, right? We tracked how much was spent in construction by private entities, right? By the tenants at Spaceport America in 2022. We also tracked the number of visitors and where they stay. So for instance, today we had several individuals testing at the spaceport, and we asked them, by the way, where did you stay? And they tell us, well, some stayed in Las Cruces, some stayed in TRC, some stayed in different areas. And those have effects not only towards the city of Las Cruces or city of through their consequences, but also to Doña County and to Sierra County as well. So this intention is what we're trying to do is create a systematic way in which we can measure the effects throughout time of what this spaceport has going. And we're gonna be improving the model, right? And as part of the improvements of the model, so right now we don't know exactly, for instance, right there you can see that in 2022, it shows that, and I don't have my glasses, well, right here, 152 individuals are employed in Doña County back in 2022, and 229 employed in Sierra County, right? And that is because those are where the jobs are located. A better way of improving that, and that is something that we're gonna be exploring with the CBED, is, okay, where do you live, right? In order to improve and be better, to get better estimates on what we have. Because I know that it has sparked plenty of discussion and the unknowns, and it has just prompted to discussions for which we don't have the responses, right? But improving the model can be one of those efforts in which we can make this better. So besides this, impacts on Sierra County, and the one that I would like to point out to is the value-added row. Well, no, it's not a row, it's a column that you have right there. Value-added refers to brand new money, economic activity that has not previously been generated, had those effects that we previously discussed, right? Visitors, number of employees, or the construction aspects would have otherwise occurred. So Sierra County in 2022, based on the model that we created, well, that CBED created for us, has an effect of about $24 million in 1 year in 2022. This, by the way, will continue to be for 2023, 2024, and our intention is to continue to do this every single year so that we have an estimate, an accurate way in which we can systematically look at ourselves and say, we did these changes to the model, we adapted this, and we're trying to track what is the actual effect that we have in place along with our partners at CBED. Doña, you can see that the value added was $27 million just in 2022, based on some of the numbers that you have right there. That's in brand new economic activity. One point of clarification, some people ask about what is the difference between output and value added. Output refers to sales. So the number of times that you have something sold, for instance, and the best example I have for this is like washing a car. If you wash your car and I wash your car and there's only $10 for which we're charging each other, we're just passing the money along our lines, right? But that just repeats itself. So sales is different from production in itself, right? And production is the value-added number that I want to bring yourselves to right there. The overall production of the Spaceport has been accounted to about $60 million, at least in 2022, based on the estimates that we have. And we will continue to improve on this as we continue to move forward. Your math, if you're looking at that, and you're adding both 24 and 27, and that obviously doesn't add to 60, is because there's effects that are larger than the counties in itself, right? There's benefits to the state in general. So those are the estimates, and fortunately that we have the authors as well in here, and we're open to questions or any other discussions that you may have. Oh, obviously, yes, one of the most important aspects, originally one of the missions of the Spaceport, not just about improving the business in aerospace, but also developing the workforce and the jobs created in the aerospace sector in here. And I think Scott provided a perfect example of that, of how he was able to land as an engineer, and many other cases, other aerospace engineers that are coming to the state just because of this.
But also the total number of jobs, which the direct, indirect, and induced, you saw that by county. But this number of 810 jobs that wouldn't be here if it weren't for the Spaceport. So, and again, I think that number will go up when Virgin Galactic comes back. And again, as we can increase the number of tenants on site, we're hoping that number is going to be, closer to 1,000 in a few years, and then a couple thousand, maybe 4 or 5 years from now. And obviously, that's one of the biggest goals with the Spaceport. And as Francisco said, Dr. Kramer here, who worked on the report, he offered to come. So if you'd like to ask any very specific questions about the report, I think we handed out the economic impact report last time. It's, some of these are kind of hard to understand, but if you have any questions about that or the methodology or anything, he's here to answer any of your questions.
Let's go back 3, 4 slides. One more. Yeah, that one. So you've got 381 people shown here in 2022. That's how many people were employed in Doña and Sierra County?
Those are visitor days.
I'm sorry?
Visitor days?
Okay. It says tenant employment. It doesn't say visitors.
I'm putting with the cursor. Do you refer to this number, Mr. Chair, or do you refer to this number?
I'm referring to the one above.
To this one, 152.
In Doñana, but all total is 381.
Correct.
Okay. If you go down 3 more slides. That one? Now it shows 810.
That's direct jobs.
That's right. Well, so was the other one. They were both direct jobs.
For the direct jobs in the total, correct? So this is the total between Doña Ana County and Sierra County. As I mentioned, there are other effects that also happen.
Okay, the other one is
That are
Sierra
spilled
County
over.
and Doña County as well.
Correct. So this number, to clarify, this number right here is the addition of these two numbers.
That's correct.
Correct.
And it shows Doñana and Sierra County.
Correct.
Okay, the number on page 22 also shows it, but now the number is direct is 548 on the same period.
Correct, sir. The reason behind it is because there's effects that happen throughout the state, not just in both counties.
No, the direct is direct. I mean, it's people who actually work here. How did that change by over almost 150 jobs over the same period of time from the same report?
Yeah, the first numbers that are lower were for tenant employment. So that's tenants at the Spaceport located there. And then the additional number comes from the construction and then the visitor days.
Okay, and so so the additional numbers of 150 people are still out there working? I mean, they worked the whole year, 150 extra people?
For the year of 2022, that was the number of direct jobs that were created through construction for that year in that year, for the direct effect.
Okay. All right, so that's how I got to 548. So the one, 381, now you've got direct 191. Spaceport for Doña County. So direct is not the same as tenant. So direct does not include tenant.
It includes tenant, it includes construction, and it includes the total, the one that you see on the screen right now, it's the total of all the effects. Doña County, Sierra County, and State of New Mexico.
Okay, so you changed the report since you published it a year ago?
No, there's no, I think we do have a mistake there. The total was 811 in the report instead of 810, but everything else is the same.
Still 800.
Yeah, it's the 2022 report. We haven't done one for 2023, but our intent is to start doing this for every year so we can also kind of get a cumulative look at what the Spaceport is doing. Remember, this is just for 1 year.
Okay.
Good.
So if their tenant represents the other 158, or not the tenant, but the employees or construction workers, where did they live? Did they come in from Albuquerque, or did they come in from Texas, or do they live in Sierra County? Do they live in Doña?
That is a great question, Mr. Chair, and that is part of what we're going to be improving in our next report, right? So those questions about the specificity of where people live, where those jobs get created, we don't have information on that, because what that would imply is that we actually go and ask each worker that goes into the spaceport, where do you live when you come and you do the work for this specific aspect? Our expectation, however, is that most of those jobs are either from Sierra County or Doña County at the same time.
Okay, so they have a labor value, and they also have value add and output. Okay, I'm still confused about the report.
But I'll mention one other thing, in terms of our operational budget, like I said, we're about 65, 70% funded. So the other way to look at the direct is I'm 70% paid for by private industry. So the report takes into account some of the labor that's associated with the private money that's coming into the spaceport, not the government money, but the private money. So we have a security team out there, ambulance, fire, and security, and it's about 35 full-time equivalents. So again, another way to look at the total direct jobs, but it does include some of that aspect as well.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, any other questions from the board?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Vice Chair.
it would be valuable in the report to identify the direct and indirect outputs in dollars, but I think it's also very demonstrative where people live who work at Spaceport. There are not very many folks that work at Spaceport that live in Sierra County. Most of them commute, or they even have vans that drive them. And I think that we need to look at that from the economic aspects.
Yep, Mr. Chair. I think that right now you can look at it in terms of most of the construction dollars go to Sierra County, personal property taxes, but yeah, most of the people live in Las Cruces. I said to a few of you that I think if that dirt road got paved out to the site so that they wouldn't have to drive all the way to Ingle, that would shave off a lot of time, and I think that would make a difference, because at the TRC meeting we had a couple of weeks ago, we met a few people that live in TRC and prefer to live in TRC. And I think as the spaceport grows, we're going to see more and more people that want to be in that area.
We are seeking funding for that cutoff road that goes through Rod Hill's property. That would cut off 7 miles, I believe. And it's going to take quite a process to get that built. We go back to the EISs and the cultural sites and the design, but that is one of our objectives, to seek funding from the state and participation from Department of Transportation on that.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, one additional thing that I wanted to mention for everyone is that, as I mentioned, we are building regional partnerships that are much stronger now as well. So we are also getting together with the Middle Rio Grande Economic Development Association, which Sierra County is part of, in order to see and assess what are some of the potential areas in which, whenever we have customers or we have potential tenants, see what are the areas that all of the different areas that we have to offer, right? So right now, I know that the manufacturing aspects, for instance, in Santa Teresa, the readiness that they have with some of the availability of land are quite attractive for some of the customers that we have. But at the same time, we want to be able to go to Sierra County and see in which areas can we assist you if you need information about potential tenants or potential information that we can have on homes or different aspects like that would also be very valuable for us. So we are building that relationship with the Middle Rio Grande Economic Development Association, precisely to have all of these major aspects as part of the area that we serve.
All right, any other questions? Okay, I think the next item on the agenda is for me to do a presentation. Hold on a second. Are you going to run the slides for me back there? That's a yes. Then go to the next slide. Start the next slide. Sorry, are you going to run the slides from the video room? If you are, go ahead and go to the next slide. Yeah, looks like I'm going to do it. All right. Okay, I'm looking at my computer. And my computer didn't change, thank you. Okay. You guys know, if you look at this, we passed the legislation for Spaceport America Act in 2000, it was 5831 is the act. And the legislation for Spaceport was actually 5-16-1. Next slide. Doña County Spaceport Regional Tax District, we formed that in 2007. 2007-21 was, and ordinance 2007 is what we passed in Doña County. You guys have yours here. Next slide. The Spaceport America Regional Tax District requested Spaceport Authority issue bonds in 2009, 2010 to provide us $76 million, $70 million in funding for capital improvement projects, specifically Virgin Galactic Facility and Spaceport Operations Center. May the 7th, 2009 was $58 million. Yes, I said 70,000, 70 million. 58 million, and on 2010, October 2010, it was another 22 million. Next question, next slide. So in Doña County, speaking about the Santa Teresa area, I would have loved to have $120 million that we've actually spent on maintaining these bonds for the last 15 years, 16 years, and put that toward economic development in the community. And we've got a lot of other things we could use that money for. And I think you guys have the same things, because we're struggling in Doña County over a 20-year period with infrastructure, with pervasive internet for everybody. We're struggling with sewer systems, transportation. We don't have enough for health care, both mental and general. And we also have food deserts, where people live so far away, they don't have access to food without driving 20, 30 miles. And also, we also struggle with a prepared workforce. And so this money that we spent, $120 million in the last 20 years, could have been used to generate more economic development in the county than what we've experienced from the Spaceport. That's just our perspective. Next slide, please. I took the numbers that you all provided on the impact economic study to provide these tables here. In Table 5, the tenant then was showed at 152 and 229, which is 381 for tenant. And then you showed the visitor days as 6,731 for Doña County, which equates to $310 a day, or $2.1 million added to that. And then I took the direct numbers for labor at $16,242,000 in Doña County from your chart. And if you go to the next slide, the direct labor ends up totaling 16.8 million, and the visitor days end up being 2.1 million, additional 2.1 millions for a total of like 18 million. When I sift that through the county's tax system to see how much money we actually get back for the citizens that are paying the taxes, the state gets 4.875% of that $18 million, which equates to about $892,000 that they get in taxes. The county, we only get 1.652%, or 1.625%, which means that the county, from the $118 million that's spent in Doña County, we only get $297,000, but yet we're ponying up well over 10 million every year to this adventure. Our lodging tax in the county is zero because we don't have a lodging tax. So if they stay in the county, which we don't have any hotels in the county either, they're all in the city, we still get zero tax. We do get Spaceport GRT tax from everything that's spent in the county, and that totals about $45,000 a year, which if we in fact just take that money and try to pay the money back to the community for the taxes they provided to support Spaceport, it'll take us 2,633 years to do that. If we just consider the tax we're collecting all these people living in Doña County. And now Las Cruces, on the other hand, they get 3.1875% from that, or $583,000, and they have a lodging tax of $915,000. So they are benefiting to the tune of about $1.4 million, or $1.4 million from what Spaceport does, which is still over almost 4 times of what we actually get in Doña County. So anyway, next one. Well, this is basically, this is about the pledged revenue, and that's the one I talked about. We'll forget that one. And skip this one, next slide. But these are actually the documents that provided my lead going into saying we have obligated that money already to pay off the bonds. Next slide, please. Next slide. This shows actually exactly how much you guys put in, how much we put in, and how much went to schools on a yearly basis from 2009 till now. And I've totaled it up. On Sierra County, you all have actually, you've actually put in about $5.7 million. I can imagine that amount of money over this period of time would do a lot to go towards your economic development in the county. And our contribution has actually been a total of $147 million when you consider the cost to what the schools have, what the burden is for the bonds, and also the interest that was charged on these bonds for the last 20 years. So this money we're talking about is economic development, what you guys are bringing back. If we had all the direct money funneled back into Doña County, or even the indirect money, we actually got it back in the county or got taxes on it, I mean, that would be great, but most of them is going to the city. So my constituents are seeing this, and they've been on me for 5 years to say that this is not the best investment we can make for $150 million in the county. And I'm not saying you don't need the money. I'm not saying what you're trying to do is not good. I'm just saying that when we do a balance and we look at it and say, where can we get the value back for our money, as Director Sanchez said, what you're asking us for, you're not showing us how we're going to repay this money to our constituents in the county that are actually paying the taxes to generate $150 million. And that's our biggest challenge. I mean, some businesses are benefiting, some are not, but if you look at these numbers, the taxes we're collecting don't even come close. So we're actually getting those from the 200,000 people that live in this county that are paying the taxes to cover this. And the businesses, yeah, maybe they're getting money and they are getting money, but certainly not enough to cover this kind of debt and burden on our constituents. Next slide. This next slide, I think that's all I've got to say. Okay. So if anybody have any questions about that, because I used the exact numbers and direct numbers from your report that you provided last year on the economic impact. And I use those numbers to calculate how much tax we're actually collecting, and we're not collecting anything near. You can close that. We're not collecting anything near what we're actually putting into the bond costs and what we're putting into Spaceport. Now, my request personally is that you guys show us how and where we're going to get this amount of money back. Is it going to be 5 years? Is it going to be 10 years? Are we waiting for 2040? Will we ever take 633 years to get the money back from the investment that we've made in the Spaceport? And as Director Sanchez says, you know, you haven't provided us and me any evidence that shows that we're moving in a direction that's going to provide enough economic benefit to support the endeavor that you guys are trying to get us to fund. So that's my biggest problem. If you want the money and you're going to take 150 million, you're going to return 300 million, God bless you, I'll give you every dime of it. But when I give you 150 million and all I get back is $800,000 a year to pay the people that put the money into it, I guarantee you I've got plenty of uses for that money where I get a bigger return. We put less than $20 million down in Santa Teresa at the Border Industrial Association, and we're now getting over $3 billion back from there. I mean, we're not putting that kind of money in it, but if I had this to put down there, I could grow the jobs down there and raise the standard of living for everyone. So this is where my concern is, and what I'm trying to figure out is how are we going to use this money to really make an impact and show me a direct link between the investment and what the return is. That's all I've got. Any other board members have any questions, comments?
I've only
Vice
got a
Chair.
comment, Mr. Chair. You know, the Spaceport Act was passed in 1978. The counties passed the 2/8 GRT, and I don't remember the dates, but they were passed by a voter referendum. And the Spaceport Act is very definitive that the only thing that those monies can be used for is to pay off the bond, and that any excesses must be distributed for financing, planning, designing, engineering, and construction of a regional spaceport. No more than 25% of the municipal regional spaceport gross receipts, tax, or county regional spaceport gross receipts, tax revenues may be used by the governmental unit enacting the tax for spaceport-related projects. We have the same concerns that you do with a much smaller economy in Tier C. And we've got a growing homeless and mental health problem, and it's due to the drugs that are coming from our neighbors from the south. We have kids going into OD and going to the emergency room that are taking fentanyl because their friends gave it to them. But that doesn't have anything to do with this issue. The only thing those funds can be used for is that exactly. And it was a voter referendum, and only a voter referendum can change it.
With all respect, Vice Chair, I agree with you. I do agree with you on that, is what these funds can be used for until the bonds are paid off. You're correct. That's all we can do. So, no, I'm just making a point that if we're talking about economic impact, and we're talking about what this investment is bringing to the community, which is what they just talked about, I'm saying that your community and my community both are struggling with a lot of problems that this money could have been used for if we hadn't been paying these bonds. Now, can I change that? No. Right now, I can't.
Well, I agree with that.
Okay, so if I can't change it, that's okay. But let me ask you this question. When you build a road in Sierra County, if nobody used it, would you get your return on the money? No. You wouldn't. If you build a road to someplace and people use it, then you've made a good investment. When you build a road and nobody uses it, you made a bad investment.
It's a mute argument.
Why?
If you want to change it, then have another referendum. You can't change it because you can't controvert the law.
I'm not saying I'm trying to. You're misunderstanding what I'm saying.
Yes, I am, because
What I'm
that's
saying,
what it appears to be to me.
no, all I'm saying is that if I invest in something, okay, I'd like to see a return that is equal to what my investment is or more.
I don't disagree.
Okay, and that, in their economic impact, that study that they're providing doesn't accomplish that, is what I'm saying.
Well, As far as this tax district board is concerned, that's a moot point to me.
Mostly, yes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, I believe
Yes.
Director McLaughlin wants to make a statement.
okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think what you're really talking about is opportunity cost. You know, you can spend the money here, you can spend the money there, right? And what are the goals of trying to spend the money? The thing about a public works like this, and Santa Teresa is a really good example because that's basically a government-funded project. It goes back 50, maybe 60 years. Someone had an idea about building a border, but a new border crossing. But if you look at what's happened and how long it took to develop, there are a lot of naysayers 20, 30 years ago, right? It took a long time for it to build up. And, but I think probably all of it is, other than the private developers who moved in there, I think all the infrastructure was paid for by the taxpayers, either Doña County or the state. I think there's been some federal grants. The spaceport's a lot like that. We're in a unique market that the federal government has not entered into helping commercial spaceports yet. There is legislation this year, the first time, that we've been trying to push through at the federal level to get help on infrastructure, because the nation eventually is going to need regular spaceports. The world's going to need spaceports around the world. It's kind of hard to imagine right now, but you go back 100 years ago and people didn't think we were going to be getting on giant aluminum things and flying across the country. So we're in that stage of space. I think New Mexico is in a really good spot. It's transformational. I mean, you could spend money on other things in the county, and I agree with you. This is taxpayer money. This isn't county money. This was, again, voted on by the referendum. But this is transformational. We already have 200, direct from Virgin Galactic that are here, and that 810 jobs. That's 810 jobs and $60 million that wouldn't be here without the spaceport. So how you evaluate that with collected GRT, I don't know that this county or the citizens get a direct payback. Like you said, you calculated out how many years. It was a long time, right? If all you look at is GRT. But if you look at 2022, $60 million of new money came into the county and into both counties or into the area, and 810 jobs. How else would we do that, right? So I think it's important to focus on the other aspects are tourism. Again, once we get the CVG and our other customers fly regularly. So, I have the same questions when I go to Santa Fe. When is the spaceport going to pay for itself? And, this is a hard question. When did the Golden Gate Bridge pay for itself? You brought up a road that isn't a toll road. You can't even determine when it paid for itself unless, I guess, you tried to calculate the number of people on the road, right? But what we are is we're a harbor, we're an airport, we're a bridge. The idea that we are building something that will transform the area, can transform New Mexico. And I don't know of another, if you were to sit down and look at all the other possible industries, the Las Cruces and Doña County and Sierra County could have gotten into to fundamentally transform the area. Aerospace is right up our alley. And so I personally, and I grew up here, I don't think it's a bad investment. But I agree with you that calculating when that payback happened, and I think of the 5 of you, and there'd be one more, not all of you are even going to agree if the payback comes from jobs, if it comes from GRT, or if it comes from the 60 million of new money. Everybody's going to have a different idea of what the payback is. And I think it's a good discussion, but I just want to point out that there are a lot of ways to look at that payback, and it's not just the GRT money.
Mr. McLaughlin, let me ask you the question I asked you earlier in the meeting. How much money did you request from the state, and how much did you get?
Yes, sir. I think we requested about 30 million, Mr. Chair. We didn't get it because we haven't been spending our capital outlay fast enough. We expect to be able to get more capital outlay next year.
Okay, so another observation I'd like to make for this board and for you is that the spaceport is a state organization. It's not a county organization, neither Sierra or Doña. So our responsibility, as Vice Chair's accurately pointed out, is to basically provide GRT tax in order to build some infrastructure over a 20-year period of time. That's kind of what we signed up for, right? However, we can't even come close to giving you the amount of money you need. And because it's a state organization, if they can't fund you guys as legislators in the state, I don't personally feel comfortable giving you a lot more money until we see some evidence that we're going to get some real value from what we invest in. And I still believe that this is really something that the state should be doing. And I've told the legislators that. You've been there when I've told them that. Okay? It's not that I don't want you to succeed. It's not even that we don't want to support you. It's my opinion, if you're not getting what you need and it's the state's responsibility, then putting additional burden on what we're trying to do here is also not going to work. But in addition to that, I just think I'd like to see more evidence that there's going to be a return, as Director Sanchez said. If we build this road, how many people are going to use it and how much money is it going to generate? And I haven't seen that in anything that you've provided over the last 5 years.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Director Sanchez.
Thank you. I think the Vice Chair's point is well taken, that when we're looking at this, we're looking at the tax, what was approved, and what we're trying to decide here as a board. I think one of the things that, for what it's worth and taking into account, is the fact that when this was passed via referendum, the dynamics have changed significantly with the economics of the counties, the funding coming through, the funding of Spaceport America now being more funded through the state, et cetera. So I think as we've seen growth in the counties, we've seen a linear, I think really the tax board was really created, and I could be wrong, and maybe I understand, was to help pay for the bonds that were going to go to the capital projects for Spaceport America. But as we've continued to grow, and this is not just Spaceport America is the only source of growth, at least for Doña County, as you've highlighted with Santa Teresa, we've had significant growth in Doña County since these were originally passed. And in the meantime, while we've continued to see that growth, like I said, here's where I say it's linear, is because it's an automatic 75% of that intercept tax that comes to Spaceport America, which is way more than what we need to pay off the bond. And I think that gets to the point that I think the chairman is talking about is, when we start looking at, like I said, and I know it's kind of a, where are we going to invest? And I understand that's where this is. But I think when you start bringing in the state to bring in funding, I think it's a valid point that we should be looking at what do we do with these these additional funds. And that's why I said, if you looked at it just as the monies we have as defined as the board, yes, they are defined for the capital projects. But if we were to look at it in that this monies were used to pay back the bonds and guarantee those bonds, then maybe if you look at it from that perspective, what would be the biggest return for us in the counties? Is it to start paying off these bonds early, or is it to finance capital projects at Spaceport America, because with what has been provided with the impact study? So I only bring that up only because I said it's just, we've come a long way. And I know we've got only a few more years left to pay these bonds off. But if we continue to look at it, what can we do to maybe get closer to where we can achieve our goals as counties? Not that I say I want to bail on Spaceport America. I just trying to figure out what's going to be the best way and how do we manage the funds that we have so that it gives us the freedom as elected officials within our jurisdictions to serve our people the best way we can.
Yep. Mr. Chair, can I add two things real quick?
I think Director
Oh,
Day
sorry.
has a comment.
No, I'll actually, if he's going to respond to Director Sanchez, I'll go after.
Yes, sir.
Oh, one thing to keep in mind is when we refinance the bonds, they're at about 0.8% interest rate, I think. So it's, by today's standard, it's kind of free money. So I think taking the excess pledge revenue, which in a sense, none of us, well, some of us might have been here and voted on that. I hadn't come back to New Mexico yet, but that was what was set up. I agree that at the time and now the economy is large enough, the economies in the two counties are large enough that there's a significant or part of excess pledge revenue. But given the cost of money, putting more infrastructure while we can into the spaceport, I think is a good investment. The other thing, I've heard the statement about it's a state project. It is a state project, state initiated. We all know Governor Richardson got it started, but PSL made the study back in the 90s, probably with state money, to try and figure out where to put a spaceport. So the whole idea of the concept of the spaceport goes way back and has always been a regional thing. And in my estimation, the state would not give any part of the state a project of this magnitude and not expect the local constituents to help, especially because it's the local counties that are deriving the best, the biggest benefit. So I hesitate, even as a state employee, to say that it should be only a state project. I just don't think we would get the legislative support if we tried to make it purely a state project. I think the legislators who come from all over the state and, Clovis, what do they think about the spaceport, right? This is why we're very focused on the regional buildup of space in New Mexico and Space Valley, because as Francisco said, there's only a few locations in the country, Florida's #1, where you can design, build, and manufacture and go to space. Well, we're going to be able to do that right here. The idea of orbital launch is probably 10 or 15 years away, but just like airline safety is improved, rocket safety is going to improve, the technology is going to improve. So if you could imagine what it would be like to have an orbital launch every few months out of Spaceport America and what that would mean in terms of manufacturing, payloads, people, it's important to think that big for a project this big. This is really a 100-year project. But I would say that you would probably lose legislative support if we tried to push this completely on the state. Because legislators in Clovis and other places far away would say, hey, I'm not going to pay for that if they're not going to help themselves as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I know Spaceport presented their numbers, you had your presentation, and I guess just from a laying all of our cards on the table standpoint, I guess a question for you, Mr. Chair, is at what point would you consider Spaceport successful? And just for, I mean, we're having two different targets here. We're hearing from Spaceport, we're hearing from the chair. Just so Spaceport can understand kind of, here's your level where we consider successful.
Thank you. I think that's a great question. Let me cover a couple of other things. He said it's 0.8% we're paying on the bonds now in 2021. You're right. That's significantly better. We're actually not doing something with this money that we could be doing, and that is that we could allow our county to invest this money, and we're averaging 5% return on the money. So we could actually grow this pot, and that's one thing. The other thing we can do is we don't have to give the money. We can loan the money and charge interest. That's one of our resolutions. I think it's number 7 or 8 that says we're not obligated to give the money. We can actually say, we'll loan you the money and then you can pay us back over time. So that's why if we get a return on the money, I can say, what are you going to do with it? Where's the money going to come from? We can say, as a partnership, we will provide you funding, then you can pay us back and we can benefit and you can benefit, and we can create a sustainable model. Right now, we have no sustainable model. When we get these bonds paid off in 2029, if the state doesn't take over, we're going to pull out. Personally, we're going to pull out and say we're not going to provide any more money, and we have that right to do that because as soon as the bonds are paid off, we're not obligated to continue. What I would prefer to see for my actual return is I'd prefer to see you guys be successful enough that by the time these bonds are paid off, we are having such a boom in industry at Spaceport and in Doña County that we're willing to continue to fund your operation. That's success. Okay? That's what I'd like to see is successful. And because whether we pay them off now or we pay them off in 2029, as soon as we pay those off, that would provide you more money to invest in it, because as long as we stay in for the next 3 or 4 or 5 years. The question is once the bonds are paid off, what motivation would Doña County have to continue? That's the real question, and that's what I've asked you several times, and I'll ask you again. What is your plan for sustainability for this organization? If you can give me that, I'll feel much better about providing you whatever money you need to be successful. But I haven't seen a plan for sustainability, for return, for anything that shows me that we're making a good investment. And as a guy who was in business for 40 years, I rarely enjoy giving money to people with no idea of what I'm going to get back for it. And that's why I'm standing like this.
Yeah, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess the couple things I heard there was, we had a presentation from you saying, well, we could use this money elsewhere. And then in that address, you said, well, we want to help Spaceport. We want to support Spaceport. We want to see it successful. And so my issue is, we pay off the bonds, say tomorrow, and we can use the money at that point to help benefit Spaceport. But yet you sit there and say, and you've attempted, we need to cut the GRT. And so I'm just trying to put all of our cards on the table here, and just, if your goal is to pay the bonds off and then cut the tax, that's fine, that's your opinion, but I think we just need to lay our cards on the table and just say that. I guess that's a point in asking those questions, and I may disagree with you, but if that's your opinion, that's your opinion, and that's totally fine. For Spaceport and for us on the tax board and the two counties involved, I think that just needs to be said, and that's totally fine. I'm not gonna say one way or the other.
If Spaceport could provide the return on investment that we can get with the money in other areas of the county, then I'm all in. I just haven't seen anything since I've been on this board that would suggest that I'm ever gonna get that. So why would I, as a representative of the people who elected me, continue to take the money and basically give it to an organization that is not accomplishing their goal? If you looked at our board meeting on the Crisis Triage Center that happened a couple of months ago, they kept asking for more and more money. We started out at $200,000 a year, then we went to $300,000 a year, then we went to $600,000 a year, then we went to $900,000 a year, and they still weren't seeing enough patients to justify what they were doing. So the next time they asked to go to 1.3 million a year, we said no. And I'm looking at this the same way. It's like I am obligated as an elected official for the county of Doña to look at this investment and say, what is the return to the people that I'm serving because they elected me to this position? And when I look at that, this operation doesn't measure up, okay? Not even close. And so that's why I'm having angst about considering giving you more money and more money and more money with no idea of what, as Director Sanchez said, with no idea of what benefit it's going to pay and how we're going to get a return on it. And and I haven't changed my position on that since day one. I really haven't. The $7 million that we spent on operations and marketing, that's just basically went down the toilet because we really got nothing for it. And I'm still not happy about that. And that was a decision that was made by the board before I was on, against our recommendation in Doña County. We voted and said, don't give them the money twice. And still this board gave them the money and we got nothing for it. So if you want, that's the cards.
And that's all I'm asking.
And now with this 2021, with this interest rate the way it is, we can make a lot more money investing it and growing that fund and have more money for the Spaceport if they were successful to give to them. That's a sustainable model. I can get you 3, 4, 5% for this money we've got in reserve easily, and we can grow it to the point, and then when you need 30 million, we'll have 30 million. But I don't feel comfortable giving it to you until you can show me that when I give you the 30 million, we're going to really see some solid results from it.
You won't
And
get
now that's
30
just me.
million from 5%.
I'm sorry?
You won't get 30 million from 5%. That'll
didn't
take
say-
you 40 years.
No, I said we can get 5%.
Yeah.
Okay, and believe me, if we take the money and continue to invest it right now, we won't get that return, but we're on track right now to have $30 million in reserve in the next 3 years.
I think that there is a very stark contrast here, and I'm going to make a statement, and it goes back to the Spaceport Act. This money is not Doña's money. The money is not Sierra County's money. The money is 2/8 gross receipts taxes collected for the purposes of paying off the bond and for financing, planning, designing, engineering, and construction of a regional spaceport. You can't use this money for anything else. I don't think it's legal that you invest this money.
Oh, it is. It's actually in the act in Section 8.
Well,
It says we can
That's
invest.
the kind of stuff we need in a packet to prepare to discuss. and I don't even have a copy of the resolutions. Is there a copy of the current bylaws that are in effect that are signed?
Yes,
Where is it?
I have a copy on my desk.
I asked for it for this meeting.
Okay.
If you remember, I wrote you an email. And I said, provide these things.
Okay.
And the current bylaws was one of them.
Okay.
I think this discussion is just, it's superfluous. We have to obey what the Spaceport Act says. And so if there are things that I'm missing, I read this for 2 nights. You can point those out to me. We've got to have materials that we can review to discuss in a meeting, and we're not there.
Well,
I don't know what we're doing, but I know that we've collected $833,913.97. $833,000, $834,000 since 2021 from the GRTs. We put that into a suspense account monthly on the first Monday of the month. The treasurer does that. The intercept is collected by New Mexico Finance Authority. This money is sitting there in a suspense account, and it's not being used. And I think you've got, what, 13 million?
something like that. Yeah.
I asked for that number too.
I didn't have an exact number. I still have it. She was sitting here and I was gonna get it from her,
I
but
asked
we
for
didn't
that
go down
number
that
in the
way.
email, your best guess estimate.
And I did tell you it was about 13 million last time I looked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We ought to be considering what this board is gonna do with that money. You can't spend that money for anything else. You can't build a
Okay.
dam or a road or a public housing unit. The only thing you can use that money for is what's in the Space Act.
Okay, Vice Chair. If you did read the entire Spaceport Act, okay, we do have other ways we can use the money. Investing it is one of them. As a matter of fact, we are allowed to take the balance that we have, you have and I have, and actually ask our treasurer or your treasurer to invest in the state fund in order to grow that amount of money while we keep it in reserve. As a matter of fact, our county, because we didn't ask them to invest it on our behalf, invested it and made almost 5% over it over the last year of our money, because this board did not make a decision to ask them to invest it in the state fund. So we are lacking in our ability to understand what is available to us because of these kind of discussions. And you've been on this board longer than I have, and the act hasn't changed. And I don't know why Mr. Pato and you haven't sat down and understood the options that we do have available with this money, and it's not building condos, you're correct. But it is investing, it is funding projects where we can get a return on our investment because they can pay us back. It's not always just give them the money. What I'm suggesting as part of this board, as my responsibility as this board, is that we start to look at what a sustainable model is going to look like for both this board and the counties. And right now, just giving them money that shows no return is not a sustainable model. And our county, as long as I'm on this board, when we get to the point where we don't have to give them money and get nothing for it, I'm going to support the idea that we get out of it. I don't want that to happen. I want them to do something that actually shows me that I should continue to support them. I've been asking for it for 4 years. And so far, nobody's holding them accountable for what we give them. If you don't want to do that, that's your business, but don't think that I want to give my money away to somebody who's not going to be accountable for it.
It's not your money.
No, it is my money. It's my tax money. It's our tax money.
It's the 2H GRT that was collected by the
And
county
it-
for use by the Spaceport.
And if you look in 2004 and 5, when it was announced, they promised a return of over 4,000 jobs and $500 million a year. And that's why we signed up for it. And I don't see that coming anytime in the near future.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I don't know if, I think we're reaching a point of diminishing returns in the discussion, and I don't know if it might suit us well to either move on with the agenda and continue the discussion, or if it'll go on. I don't even know if agenda item G will end up going on within the same issues or not, but.
Thank you, Director Sanchez. Scott, I'll let you have something else to say.
Just one thing, Chairman, I appreciated Travis's question, and like I said, when I go to Santa Fe, you know, the LFC, the Senate Finance Committee and the HAFC have similar discussions, and I think they're always when you spend taxpayer money, it's fair to have a discussion, but I think for us who just happen to be running the spaceport at the moment, it'll be someone else several years from now, and it was other people before. What is the measure of success? I know that there was an original measure of the 4,000 jobs, but that ship probably sailed in the sense that everything that those involved then thought was going to happen, including those on the private side and the government side, were not right. But we do know that space is hard, and like I said, if you haven't seen Starship yesterday, you should go find it on YouTube just to prove that incredible things do happen. But I would go back to Director Day's question, though, if the way you're phrasing the return is that there's been zero return. In fact, I think you said that specifically a couple of times. You know, for 2022, there were 810 jobs and $60 million. That is some measure of success. So in your mind, Chairman, I would like to understand for us, what is the measure of success that would get your vote on something like this? I guess I'm confused. Progress is being made. The slope is in the right direction. There are results. So what more is helpful at this point?
I think I've answered that question several times, and I'll repeat it one more time. I'd like to have a plan that actually shows me where the return on the investment is actually going to be. As Director Sanchez asked earlier, when we build this road, who's going to use it? When we build this road, what kind of impact is it going to have on the spaceport? Give me something solid that actually says, if we invest here, we've got this company that's going to move in here and do this. You guys are not providing those kind of ideas, those kind of numbers. In addition to that, another success, seriously, is for us to be able to loan you the money and you give it back, and with interest, so we can build a fund that you can live on for the next 20 years. I mean, there's all kinds of options here that we haven't explored as a board because we get into these kind of discussions. And Vice Chair, I do appreciate what you're saying, but we get into discussions where we're not discussing the same facts. We're seeing the facts differently. And as long as we as a board don't take the time to sit down and understand what the possibilities are, and we have discussions like this, we're probably never going to see eye to eye on it. Okay, but as I've also mentioned, I've not been on this board forever. Okay, I guess I was on the same time as these guys were, but I've only been on the board for 6 years. And I'd still like to see something that says, we're going to make this investment and this is who's going to use it and this is why. And this is how much revenue it's going to bring. You have plenty of people come out in the parking lot. You're going to grow the parking lot. I think that's worthwhile. But the people that come out as spectators, how much revenue do they generate? None. So how do we get the link between building a parking lot to hold 200 people and revenue for the spaceport or for the counties? Okay? Because even if they drive in from Sierra, they drive in from Doña County, they go to the spaceport, they see that, they leave. We're not even sure whether they go to the restaurants in Sierra County, they go back to Socorro, they go to Albuquerque, they go to El Paso. We don't even know. And I guess I'm saying I don't see that kind of evidence being presented. And this is, you know, everybody else they don't have to see this. They don't have to want this. I personally would prefer to have a little better understanding of exactly how the money's working. That's just the way I've always done it. And I know that my constituents, when they talk to me, as Director Sanchez said, they come to me and they say, why are we continuing to put money in Spaceport when we're getting nothing for it? Now, we're getting something, I agree with you. There's some value there, okay? And the way you guys have measured it, it looks like there's a lot of value, and I don't totally agree with that analysis, but that's a different discussion. So I think it's clear that I'd like to see some evidence that where our investment is going to actually make a difference in real time. That's what I'd like to see. And other than that, that's all I got.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, if I might.
Yes.
So I'm looking at an agreement, a Spaceport District Formation Agreement that was executed by Brian Haynes, and that the Board of County Commissioners of Doña County approved on July 22nd, 2008. And in that resolution, let me scroll back up here, it makes plain that the purpose of the spaceport is to, 1, receive no less than 75% of the revenue generated by the Doña County Regional Gross Receipts Tax,
Correct.
the Sierra County Regional Gross Receipts Tax, and any similar tax the governmental unit joins the district may pass. My understanding is that Doña County has not made that contribution to the district as it agreed it would back in 2008. Number 2, it authorizes the district and not the individual counties. And that's where I think there's a critical distinction. Doña County is unilaterally elected to invest its money, but that was not what was authorized by the formation agreement. Instead, what was authorized in Section 7 of the formation agreement was the district may, 1, have perpetual existence except as otherwise provided in the agreement, 2, sue and be sued, 3, enter into contracts affecting the affairs of the district, 3, pledge all or a portion of the revenues to the payment of the bonds, E, aid in the construction of the Spaceport America, F, include property within or exclude property from the boundaries of the district, G, enter into contracts with the authority pursuant to which the authority may issue bonds and so forth. And H, and I think this is critical for the purposes of this discussion and your suggestion about the investment of the funds, the district and not the individual counties may invest or deposit funds in accordance with the prudent investor rules set forth in the Uniform Prudent Investor Act, New Mexico Statutes annotated Section 457601. The board shall employ the State Investment Council to invest the funds and may pay reasonable compensation for investment management services for access to the applicable funds. So my question to you, sir, is where Doña County has been investing those funds. Has it invested it in accordance with this formation agreement? In accordance with its commitment to the county?
Mr. Pato, the fact is when we put money in reserve, and we have to put it somewhere, in a bank someplace here in the county. And as a general rule in our county, they actually take the balance of that reserve and invest it to get a return on that. In order for them to invest it on our behalf, as you stated in this policy, at the state, in the state funds, which we do invest in the state funds and as a normal practice, okay? In order for them to invest it and give us the return, this board has to make a decision to approve them to do that. But as the money's laying in our accounts and we report to the state the money we have available for investment, they use that money and invest it.
The problem, sir, is that it should have never been sitting in your accounts. It should have been transferred to the district as contemplated by the formation agreement. The failure to do that is in violation of the formation agreement that the parties entered.
I don't disagree with you, okay? But this board, if you think about how the money gets invested and where it's at and where it's located, in order for it to get invested at the state level, someone has to direct them to do that, okay? I mean, they can't act on our behalf without us telling them to do it. We've never passed a resolution by this board to say, please invest these funds that you're holding for a year. But we have to do that for them to take action. Otherwise, it shows up in our balance and they get paid for it whether we direct them or not, because it's considered our pool of funds that we have to hold, and they're aware of it, and so they get some money return on it. So it's not like we directed them or we directed them not to. We put the money in reserve, it sat there, and they were collecting some interest on it. Our treasurer was. I had the treasurer here to talk to us about it, but since we didn't get into that part of the item, we didn't have a chance to go into all the detail about it. I'm happy to say, let's talk about that, because I think this board should actually say, if we're going to keep money in reserve, we should have it invested in the state fund so we can get a return on investment, and that return can get 3 to 4 or 5%.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Sure.
You were on the board, I was on the board, Commissioner Paxton was on the board. I believe Scott and Melissa were there, Attorney Pato was there, Attorney Nelson. We had both treasurers at the Sierra County Chambers where we discussed investing these funds into the LGIP.
Yes.
We had that discussion.
We
And
did.
at that time, you were the opposing voice in doing that. And so,
I don't know about
and I mean, we were all in the room. And I'm not trying to make this, I'm just saying, we looked at that option. And that option was proposed, and it was a lot of opposition on investing the funds in the LGIP account.
Okay, I think that the discussion was a little bit different. I think that we were asking New Mexico Finance Authority to take the money and invest it. And that was the discussion about, is that they were going to take the fund and invest it. Okay?
Mr. Chairman, that's not true, and that's not consistent with my recollection either. We actually provided, you had asked for additional information, supplemental information. I remember providing you a brochure about how long it would take for the LGIP to return the money because you wanted to ensure that it was sufficiently liquid.
I do
Do you
remember
remember
that,
that?
yes, I
So we
do.
provided you that information. You weren't satisfied with that, so we elected not to, or you elected not to move forward with the LGIP. But all the same, I think that you're missing the critical distinction I was making in my comments, which is that Doña County was committed pursuant to the formation agreement that we all executed when we created the Spaceport District to transfer that money to the district.
Yes.
And you have acknowledged here today, or I understand you to have acknowledged here today, that Doña County has failed to meet that commitment. Is that correct?
I am not. No, I'm not acknowledging
So
that.
when did Doña County
When
make the
the
transfer
money-
of the money it has collected to the district?
Whenever the district wants to act with the money, we're holding it for them.
That's not what the formation agreement says, sir.
So who's going to have it then?
It says, the purpose of the district shall be to receive no less than 75% of the revenue generated by the Doña County Regional Spaceport.
We need a place to put it. We don't have a bank account. We don't have a treasurer. We don't have an assistant, an administrator. This board has no mechanism to do that without relying on another organization to do it.
That's correct. And so for that purpose, the county has transferred its funds to the New Mexico Spaceport Authority to hold the funds for it. And that way, it could also then make the investments in accordance with the prudent investor rule and as outlined in our formation agreement. I don't believe that Doña County has satisfied its obligation to make the transfer of the proceeds as contemplated by the formation agreement. That's the problem. That Doña County is instead unilaterally elected to deposit the funds, likely not in accordance with the formation agreement, is very concerning to me. And it should be concerning to the public as well. And I'd like to know what's happening with the interest that's been generated on those proceeds.
Well,
Is that going to be going to the district as well? Because I would
Yes.
contemplate that would have to be under the formation agreement.
Let's deal with that at this meeting, okay? Because in this meeting, we can't deal with that unless we get the treasurers and other organizations involved, okay? So I'm not opposed to having that discussion. And there's our counselor. Didn't think you were going to be here.
I was at the Dassel Academy and I'm done. And I heard my name being thrown around, so I'm
Like
here.
always. Okay, do you want to have anything to say about this?
Well, and I kind of caught the tail end of the discussion. When I got in the building a few minutes ago, I went online and was listening. You know, Mr. Pato was bringing up that the funds need to be transferred to the district. But my biggest question on that is, where's the account? Where's the district account to put that money in? That's the biggest question I see there, that this board has failed to do that. This board has failed to establish an account to set up, where is the treasurer going to send the money? They used to send it straight to the whole amount was intercepted and went to the finance authority. That was changed when the bonds were redone, but there was never set up where the money's going to go to, what accounts it's going to go to. So I agree with Mr. Pato, that's where the money should be going, is to this board, but where's the account? What's it going to go to? I don't think it should go to Spaceport America because it's not their money. It's this board's money to decide what the Spaceport America can do with it, and I think there's part of the discussion was being had. But that's where I think that the defect of all this is there is no account to send the money to. So I don't know what this, and I think there were great questions on how it's being invested, et cetera, but I think that's where the biggest issue still lies with this, with the regional district is what account do they have to send the money to?
So, Mr. Chairman,
Vice Chair, I guess.
Go ahead.
In this case, and Nelson, I'm agreeing with you. I 100% agree with you. Again, I think we just need to, as a board, we need to revisit that discussion we had, I believe it was a year and a half ago, of looking at the LGIP or another opportunity for the money to go. I don't think anyone's arguing that. And so I get where you're coming from, and again, I agree with you. This board just has to set that up. We've attempted in the past. We got staunch opposition in doing so. It's now becoming a legal matter. We have to get this done, period.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I believe that the account that's been established by the Spaceport Authority is not for spaceport operations, it's not for other spaceport purposes, but it's a segregated account that's created to receive the money that's being collected by the tax. So that's my understanding, and I'd like the confirmation from Mr. McLaughlin, if I might. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chair and Dave Pato, that's true. I mean, we wouldn't spend the money except for authorized use and except for legal use. And it was our intent to put money into the LGIP So we are properly collecting interest from the money. It would be held by the authority, but not spent until the district agreed, because it's still up to the district to approve the release of the funds. So I think that's how it's been done in the past. It's true that the way it's been done in the past has led to the Spaceport spending money on operational purposes, but we have the advisory letter from the Attorney General, and we're set up to receive the funds so they accrue on pending approval by the tax district.
Which we are doing from Sierra County monthly.
Right, and Sierra County's been doing that for several years now, once we refinance the bonds.
Since 21.
Yeah, and Doña County, we've been very concerned that the money is sitting, earning interest when it's not Doña County money. We've had the same questions, and certainly the state investment funds are a better place, I think, because it's going to go to a state project, but I'd have to get Melissa or our CFO to talk more about that, but I think you're on the right track, obviously.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may, I think we're at a point where we have beaten a dead horse, gave it CPR, and then beat it to death again, and then continue to beat it. I would make the recommendation that at the next tax board meeting, we relook at the idea of setting up an account in the LGIP fund and putting the funds in there. That way it does away with the issues of where the money is at in Doña County, where the money is at in Sierra County, and we move forward with that initiative again, or at least consider it. I guess.
Director Day, I totally agree with you.
Okay.
Okay. I agree that we need to resolve this, and it can't be laying out there just trying to figure out what's going on. I agree. And we'll make that a priority next meeting. Mr. Vice Chair, I'm going to make a point to send you the other documents that you asked, that you requested. I apologize, I didn't get them till beforehand. I assumed, I guess, that the same documents you were asking for, you should have since they were published, when you were chair. So I thought you would have those bylaw copies. I didn't know why you wouldn't have them.
Tentative bylaws, but it's redlined. I do not have a signed copy.
I'm not sure. I think I have a signed copy, but I'm not sure.
That's what I asked for.
But that's the problem. That's the problem with not having an administrator to keep track of it.
And I agree.
Okay, so I think we're done with that. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. All right, the last thing, the next thing on the agenda is item G, I think it is, approval of funding for spaceport projects. I would like to make a motion that we postpone that until we resolve the issue with what the contract says from the bonds.
I'll second the motion.
Who seconded?
Director Sanchez.
Director Sanchez.
Are there any questions or comments about it? Yes, Director Davis.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's important that we just kind of have a discussion based on the list that the Spaceport Authority provided, just on any projects that may pique our interest. I think just a discussion on that would be appreciative.
Director Day, I do understand that. The question is, my question is, and I'm going to have to get with legal, and also, and that's one of the conversations I want to have with the Attorney General's office, is to find out what our legal standing is based on the contract that we have in place already with the funding. Because if I'm reading the contract correctly, the money that we have and we're holding does not become excess revenue until the bonds are paid off. If we've obligated through the contract of the 2021 bonds that the 75% is going to be dedicated to paying off the bonds, then we may be limited in our ability to do that without a new contract.
I don't think that's correct, because the state does an intercept, and it's done without us ever touching that money. And then the excess funds are left to us. And there is no requirement that the excess funds be held until the bond is paid off. I don't, you're going to have to show me the document. I can't take that on your say.
Okay. Director, Vice Chair Paxson, the section in the document is actually stated in the resolution that I was referring to. And it's actually, I think it's section 17 of the if I'm not mistaken, it's 12 or 17 of the contract that we signed when we signed up for the bonds. One of the sections says that, and it says specifically this because this quote is specifically from it. It says, let me get to it here. Let me, to the right one section. Okay, the specific wording in the contract for the 2021 bonds, I took it verbatim, is that 75% sum of the tax collected by Sierra County shall be used to pay 2021 bonds as required by the authority taxable receipts tax refunding revenue bond series 21 contract. That's the contract. I pulled that right out of the section. I'll have to go back and look at my notes to get you the exact section of the contract, but I'm willing to do that today. Just, it'll take me a minute to find it. But that says that we, not knowingly, we all agreed that the 75% would be used to pay the bonds off, the full amount. That's what the section says. And what we need to do is, before we decide to spend this money like we did with the funds before, the $7 million, I think we need to both review this contract and get a legal standing on it from the Attorney General's office. As soon as we do, I'll have another meeting. I'm willing to have another meeting in a week or a week and a half if that's what's necessary to get to the bottom of this. And I've got to talk to the Attorney General first to get his ruling on this contract, to see if he agrees with what I'm reading and the way I'm interpreting it.
In order to get context, don't give me a document 2, final district G&L. Give me the document. And then I'll consult with my attorney to see what's proper.
You have the document, because I know, because we all have a copy of the contract. So let me see if I can find my copy that I got. Because I had asked New Mexico Finance Authority to give me full copy. And let me see if I can print it for you. Give me a second.
Mr. Chairman, while you're looking that up, would I be able to ask a question of
Yes.
of Scott? Sir, of the projects that we have, and do you have those prioritized in terms of which ones, are these from most critical, important, down to what would be the lowest priority? I guess in what was from the presentation you provided us earlier.
Mr. Chair, Director, no, were not intended to be prioritized. I mean, the number one is probably the Stark building, but, we look at these as legal and proper use, and that is what the tax district is supposed to approve of. In terms of the priorities and what gets built, I go to my board, the New Mexico Spaceport Authority Board, where we actually work on that strategy, and I have to present to them more detailed information. So this board really, at least in the past, has not adjudicated the value of the projects, only that it's proper use of the money. The former directors then had to go to the Spaceport Authority to get that adjudication, right? Is this really the right place to spend the money, given the many options? But this was not in priority, although if we had to, we could prioritize. Rod is here again, but the intent is just to present you with a list of proper use, so we could get the train moving, because we all realize there's this interest problem, and also there's a customer problem. These are needed for customers.
Understand, but I think even in the, I think if I understood what we have in the reserves, or at least was what, 12 million, 13 million, which is still under this $15 million. So that means we cannot do it all.
Right.
So the question is, that's where I guess even if we're not going to, even if we don't approve it today, this gets postponed. I think it'd be understanding of, like you said, okay, the Stark is what you feel is the most important, and that may be partly because of the $10 million you currently have of state funding that's sitting there waiting that could revert if we don't use it. But I think that would be, an understanding of what would be the odd man out on this list.
We could take a quick look at it if you like, but like I said, it's what that means is this board has to be as equally educated about the Spaceport as the Spaceport Authority, which maybe is fair, but having both boards direct the priorities is going to be a problem if we started working that way. You guys may say, well, I want to do Project C, and that board may say, no, we want Project D. So that presents its own chain of command issue for this money.
Well, and I would ask, and I give like an example just because we had a meeting earlier with the Department of Workforce Solutions has the Area Workforce Development Board, and we have two boards in itself. One that's made up of generally private individuals that help advise that are advisory, and then you have chief elected officials, and they generally concur with each other. But usually, one will, I think in this case, one gives guidance, the other one concurs, and then we move on. I think having that understanding of, if I don't know necessarily prioritizing, but understanding if we don't have the full $15 million and we had to spend that 12 million, I would have to know even from them or from you, again, which would be the ones that we would have to wait until later to fund versus those that we would fund, if that makes sense. I'm not saying that we're trying to battle with the other board. I think having an understanding of priority and understanding why, then maybe it goes back to exactly what you said, educating us so that maybe that's outside this meeting where I need to meet with you and get more educated on your priorities so that I do understand where and why, and aside from just the presentation you gave me. So that might be, like I said, a responsibility on myself being here on this board.
Yeah, we could always provide a little more. This list is deliberately a little bit bigger because I think the total actually is closer to 15 million. But each of these projects is subject to.
I'm sorry?
It's at least 14.
Each of these projects is subject to delay in one way or the other. So the idea is that once we get the money in-house, we can get all these projects moving, but they will go at different rates. And I think my CFO, Art Trujillo, are you wanting to chime in, Art?
Yes, I was going to give you the exact number that's was given to me as of February 16th. It's 15,384,000 and a little bit of change. So about 15.4 million is, as of last month, was the balance of the GRT balance with Doña County.
There you go.
Okay, thank you.
834. Yeah. 834, yeah. Yep.
Vice Chair Paxton, I'm having trouble finding the document. I only have 500 documents on here about the spaceport.
Well, I don't think we need to waste time in waiting on finding that specific thing, but I think it's inappropriate to take action when we don't have the entire package in the situation.
And I agree with that. That's why I made the motion to postpone that until we get the package. And I have requested the full package from the New Mexico Finance Authority, and they said that they've already sent us the package, and I have a package, but it's not the package that I wanted to have, because it has everything we did. But they swear up and down that we all have packages, but I can't find mine. Can you find yours?
I don't know.
Now, see, that's the thing. And unless we have an official package, we can all say, yes, it's this, and yes, it's that. But having the right package is what I need to get from New Mexico Finance Authority, and I'm going to ask them again to give me the current package, because I've looked at the one that I have, and now I can't find it here now. But I've looked at it, and what I've quoted in here came specifically from the agreement that we have. I have no reason to lie about that. Matter of fact, it doesn't do any of us any good if we don't look at the facts. You're correct. But I would recommend, and I still recommend, that we postpone this item and have a meeting in another week and a half when I can get those documents together.
You're not going to get me in a week and a half. We're going to have a poll to determine what dates we can meet. I've got 3 free days the entire month of March.
Okay.
And those are Saturdays and Sundays.
Well, I have a similar situation.
And I can't meet in a week and a half. I need probably something in April with a date that I can reserve.
Well, April is better for me as well. Okay, I still think that we have to get more information, that we all are looking at the same thing, as you've pointed out, before we make the decision to
We
do
should
anything with the
not
funds.
have a meeting unless all of us can be present or online.
Okay, I agree. Well, anyway, I have a motion on the table. If nobody has any more discussion, I would like to get a roll call.
Director Sanchez,
Yes.
Director Day,
Yes.
Director Skinner, Vice Chair Paxton,
Yes.
Chair Reynolds.
Yes. Well, now we are at a point here to discuss the New Mexico Finance Authority documents, which I sent to everyone, but I can tell you that we need to probably postpone that as well until we have some more documents from them. Because I sent those over to you, but they're extensive, and I think we've spent enough time today. Does anybody have any objections to that? So how about if I make a motion that we also postpone item H to, just postpone it?
I'll move.
You second?
Did you move?
I did.
I'll second.
Okay, motion made by Chair Reynolds, second by Vice Chair Paxton, that we postpone item H, discuss the NMFA Finance Authority documents and how that affects the policies of the board. And I think that that's probably going to be the first thing on the agenda next time that we have that discussion. So with that, is there any more public input, or is everybody ready to go get dinner?
Mr. Chairman, if I may just make one point.
Please.
Director Sanchez only looked at me funny twice this meeting, so I appreciate that. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, he looked at you.
He only looked at me funny twice this meeting, so he's doing pretty good.
That's okay. I think Vice Chair Paxton looked at me funny a lot of times, so I think I looked at him funny as well.
We'll talk offline.
I'm sure we will. Well, anyway, thank you all for your indulgence. If there's no other public input, then this meeting is adjourned.